Chapter 867. Kidnapping scholars was a long-term plan and also a means to analyze this world. The Academy was the foundation. After the lantern-grabbing contest on the 15th day of the first lunar month, the Academy officially reopened. "You did a good job last time." Renbochin patted Lin Mengxing on the shoulder and smiled. Dayo now had the Aboriginals, the Jing tribe, and the people of the Yun nation. All of them had to act according to the law, which was what Renbochin wanted to achieve. At the very least, he couldn't let Dayo have a situation where the Aboriginals were superior while the Jing tribe and the people of the Yun nation were inferior. Whether it was the enactment or implementation of the law, this had to be shown. However, Renbochin also knew that this would take time. After all, the Aboriginals had the biggest fists, and the entire imperial court was ruled by the Aboriginals. It was impossible to make everyone equal immediately. Just like this time, even if Hong Bao killed that kid, he wouldn't receive much punishment. The punishment was because he didn't act in accordance with the Empress's decree, not because he killed the son of the warlord at will. If the son of the warlord was like this, there was no need to mention the ordinary people. Therefore, not only must the people and officials be restrained by the law, but they also had to support the other two races and give them a certain amount of power to speak. This way, a more balanced situation could be formed. "Yes, balanced. Thank you for your praise, Your Highness," Lin Mengxing responded with a smile. "How are you doing in language and mathematics?" Renbochin asked again. "I've mastered the basics of language. As for mathematics, I've studied the calculation classics of Xia Court, and many places are recorded in it. I've learned a lot by comparing the two. For this batch of new students, you will be teaching these two subjects," Renbochin said. It was the day of another batch of new students. This was the fourth batch of students at the Academy. In fact, only the first batch of students was taught by Renbochin from beginning to end. The second half of the second batch was taught by the robots and senior students. As for the third batch, Renbochin only taught for 2 months after returning from the 60,000 mountains. Next, Renbochin would focus on the second and third batches of students. As for the new batch, there were 2 classes and 100 students. Lin Mengxing, the senior students, and the robots would be in charge. This batch of students included his chief disciple, Zhang Kaixian, as well as 14 other youngsters from the Jing tribe. The rest of the students were the children of low-level officials, and the rest were commoners. "I will definitely do my best," Lin Mengxing immediately said with a straight face. Renbochin nodded. After explaining some things to Lin Mengxing, he left him there to wait for the new students while he returned to his office. In this half a month, the Academy underwent some changes again. The main thing was that all the thresholds had been removed, and the ground had been leveled with cement, which was more suitable for the robot to walk on. This time, Renbochin brought back 8 new robots. All of them were equipped with new internal sensors, external information sensors, chips, and programs that were more advanced than those from a few years ago. This batch of robots had simple memories. They could remember a person's face and name, and they could talk to people. Through pre-programmed settings, they could show different emotions according to different situations, and they even had different personalities. Of course, the most important thing was his teaching ability, which had improved a lot compared to before. From now on, these 8 robots would be an important part of the Academy. Their different personalities would make them different people, and they would teach different lessons to the students. After the students arrived, Renbochin first gathered them in a large lecture hall that could accommodate hundreds of people and gave a speech. After that, he gave a test to the second batch of students. 2 days later, Renbochin held a test paper with an uncertain expression on his face. This was a single-digit test paper. Although the score was only in the single digits, Renbochin had to admit that this student was very imaginative. For example, one of the math questions asked how to divide 3 fruits among 7 children. Then, He drew 4 knives and chopped 4 of the children to death, leaving only 3 children to divide the 3 fruits. He was really a genius. Perfect. Very perfect. Renbao looked up at the girl in front of him. She was Zhu Hua, a pretty and wild girl. Renbao had a very deep impression of her. She had fought with Qing Lian and Tong Lan less than 2 days after entering the academy. She also participated in the lantern-grabbing contest 2 days ago and was in the limelight. She was a typical girl with only muscles and no brains. Zhu Hua was originally a little nervous as she stood there. When she heard Renbao say that it was perfect, she immediately became excited and said, "Is it really perfect? I didn't expect it either. I just casually wrote it down." Renbao put on a fake smile and said, "It's already very perfect. However, I have some unfortunate news to tell you. You will be studying with the next batch of students this semester." "What do you mean?" "Why? To put it simply, you will be repeating a year." "As for why? The highest score in the 4 subjects is 9, and you ask me why. Is your IQ 9 as well?" Renbao snorted. He didn't expect Zhu Hua to ask hesitantly, "Is an IQ of 9 high or low?" Renbao was so angry that he almost laughed. The IQ of a normal person is between 90 and 110. Zhu Hua scratched her hair, messing up her originally neat ponytail. "Principal Ren, I know I'm not smart, but I'm not that bad, right? In addition, can I not study with the next batch of students? My younger brother is older than me. I'm officially informing you that you will be repeating a year. Not to mention that your younger brother is older than you, you won't even be able to graduate at this rate. Go back. From tomorrow onwards, you will be studying with the next batch of students." Renbao waved his hand and chased the distressed Zhu Hua away. Then, he sighed. He really didn't manage this batch of students well enough. Their results were much worse than the first batch, and most of them failed. Of course, the most outstanding one was still this 9. However, this also had something to do with the fact that he had been away from the 60,000 mountains for more than a year. It wasn't just the second batch, but also the third batch. He would put more effort into them in the future. If a small tree wasn't trimmed, it wouldn't grow straight. In the future, he would let them know what learning was. He would give them at least 1 set of questions a day to let them know what it meant to be a 3-year simulation for the 5-year high school entrance exam. Papermaking wasn't difficult, and Renbao had already created it long ago. However, the demand was small, so he hadn't expanded the production. After that day, Renbao ordered the production to be expanded. Similarly, movable type printing was not a difficult thing to do. It only took a week to complete. They even specially built a small printing plant outside the city to be responsible for printing test papers and some books at the same time. A week later, every day, the students would see stacks of test papers being sent to the school and distributed to everyone. For a time, the faces of the second and third batches of students changed when they talked about the questions. When the 4th batch of students saw the treatment of the previous 2 batches of students, they shivered and started to worry about their future. While gloating, the first batch of students also began to revise spontaneously. This was because Renbao had already set his sights on them. Chapter 868. Renbao hurried back to the palace and saw that the Empress was drinking again. He couldn't help but say, "Your Majesty, you have another child in your belly. Drinking doesn't affect you, but it does affect the child." "Oh." The Empress replied faintly, but she had no intention of putting down the wine glass in her hand. Renbao was furious. After all, that was his son. Renbao rushed forward. Renbao made his move. Renbao snatched the Empress's wine glass. Renbao typed GG. "Hey, Your Majesty, it hurts." Ranbachian's face twitched in pain. Your Majesty, when did you learn to pull my ear? Ha! The Empress sneered. Ranbachian was furious. I want to fight you one-on-one. The Empress rolled her eyes and said with a faint smile, come on. Her voice was full of encouragement. Ranbachian said, wait until my waist recovers. Ha! One-on-one. Ranbachian was furious again. This was something that no man could tolerate. Even if he had to exhaust himself and grind an iron rod into a needle, he would fight it out with her. Ha, forget it. The Water Empress stretched lazily and said indifferently. I see that you have been quite busy recently, so I'll let you off. Ranbachian snorted. He had indeed been quite busy recently. Each trip would take up to 3 to 5 days, which was too much of a hindrance. Furthermore, his waist hurt. Also, I'm afraid that your waist will break. The Empress provoked again. Ranbachian's face darkened. One-on-one. Come on then. The Empress wrinkled her nose slightly, leaned back on the sofa, and looked at him sideways. She even hooked her finger at him. Forget it, I've been quite busy recently. The bookstore and department store are opening for business tomorrow. Ranbachian felt that it would be better to take a step back and bear with it for a while. Let her be strong, let her be, humph. The Empress smirked. However, she knew that Ranbachian had been busy with some matters for the past 2 months and hadn't left the ground all day, so she let him off. The next day, 2 brand new stores opened next to the Imperial Spice Store and the Imperial Glass Store. One of them was the Imperial Department Store. There were many kinds of goods inside, but the store was still empty. The shelves were almost all the same. The goods included toothbrushes, toothpaste, soap, toilet paper, sanitary napkins, clocks, needles, thread, perfume, sunglasses, mirabolite, and a type of flour. This flour was a type of coarse grain flour from Tianjing Basin Real Estate. Although it could be eaten, it was more useful for tanning furs together with mirabolite. The toothbrush was made from beast hair, while the toothpaste was made from calcium carbonate and glycerin, a byproduct of soap production. The rest of the toilet paper, clocks, needles, and thread were common things in modern times, but they were worth a fortune in this world. The price of the iron needles was almost the same as silver of the same volume. However, compared to the iron needles of the Yun Nation and Great Xia, the price was at least 50% cheaper. It was the same for toilet paper. Although the price was already very low, it was still a luxury for the ordinary people of this world. Even though Ranbachian had positioned this department store as a grocery store, at this time, only the officials could afford it. Next to the department store was the Imperial Bookstore. Compared to the department store that was packed with people as soon as it opened, there were very few customers in the Imperial Bookstore, which was also quite large. Lin Mengxing walked into the bookstore and looked around. It was somewhat similar to the library in the academy. One part of the bookstore was filled with bookshelves, while the other part was filled with tables and chairs for people to read books. Next to the tables and chairs were windows made of floor-to-ceiling glass. Bright sunlight was shining in from the outside, and it would be a good feeling to read a book while sitting by the window. The shop assistant was from the Jing tribe, and he was slightly at a loss when he saw Lin Mengxing. Although he had gone through a few days of training, books were precious items that most people couldn't come into contact with. Those who could come here to buy and read books were also of high status. Although the person in front of him was from the Yun Nation, there were very few of them in Lan City. He immediately thought of a teacher from the Black Bamboo Academy. This was because there was a student from the Black Bamboo Academy next door, and he had heard about him before. Although the other party's status wasn't high, he was always in awe of knowledgeable people, which was a common problem among ordinary people in this era. Don't worry about me, I'm just looking around. Lin Mengxing seemed to have noticed the awkwardness of the shop assistant and smiled. It had to be said that Lin Mengxing was very amiable, and his faint smile made the shop assistant relax a little. "Can we read books here?" Lin Mengxing asked as he pointed to the tables and chairs by the window. There were bookstores in the Yun Nation, but they didn't have these things. The owner of any bookstore wouldn't welcome people who only read books but didn't buy them. "Yes, as long as the books aren't dirted or damaged, all customers can sit here and read," the shop assistant said nervously. "If the sun is too strong, there are bamboo curtains that can be pulled down to block the sunlight." Lin Mengxing nodded and then wandered around the bookshelves in the bookstore. Bilingual Comparison Dictionary, Bilingual 3-Character Classic, Bilingual Elementary Mathematics, Bilingual Xia Court Computational Classics, 3 years of simulation exercises, learning simplified Chinese characters from pictures, Bilingual Jin Ping Mei. There were about a dozen types of books, some of which were bilingual, and some that weren't labeled were all simplified Chinese characters that he had learned. He randomly picked out a book called The Secret Book of Six Heads and flipped through it. He found that the opening chapter introduced a sect called the Six-Head Sect. Most of the records in the book were herbs and ferocious beasts. There were also some methods to raise and control the ferocious beasts. Lin Mengxing was slightly surprised. He didn't expect such a book to appear in this bookstore. He took the Secret Book of Six Heads and found a long chair to sit on. Lin Mengxing closed the book and slowly pondered. Books weren't cheap in the Yun Nation. However, they could be flipped through at will here, and it wouldn't be a problem to just look at them without buying them. The purpose of Her Highness was to let everyone read and learn, be it high officials or nobles, merchants or peddlers, or even the aborigines. Her Highness's goal was to develop the wisdom of the people. The ancients had a saying, "The people can't be made aware of, but they can seek for a reason." This is the power of flexibility and deification. This meant that the superior could guide the people. Sometimes, the people could only follow his guidance and not fully understand the intentions of his guidance. Reading had always been the job of scholars. The people only needed to know what to do. If they had their own ideas, they would cause trouble. There were many people who had this kind of thinking. However, Her Highness wanted to break this rule. If the people were to read and have their own ideas, would that be good or bad? Renbaqian looked at the report in his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. After the department store opened for a few days, the fastest-selling items were sunglasses and toothpaste. Sunglasses were easy to understand. After all the ministers of the 6 ministries wore a pair of sunglasses and walked around wearing them every day. The others had been coveting them for a long time. The toothpaste sold faster than the sunglasses. The feedback was that it tasted good. Did these guys eat toothpaste as a snack? Renbaqian put down the report, picked up another one, and began to frown. He couldn't recruit any workers. Over the past 2 months, he had built a lot of new factories and recruited a lot of workers. However, the population of Lon City wasn't large, and there were even fewer idlers. The latest recruitment notice had been out for 3 days, and only 6 people had been recruited. Chapter 869. Renbaqian's vision blurred, and he returned from the palace to that villa in Shanghai. The noise from the winged cavalry warriors downstairs never seemed to change. No matter when they came back, they were always in this state. Sometimes, Renbaqian was quite envious of them. After eating, they slept, woke up, ate, beat people up, ate again, drank again, beat people up, and slept again. What a happy life. Eat, sleep, and beat Daodu. He rubbed his old waist, changed his clothes, and took a shower before calling Ren Wanyan. How is Ning Kaichen doing? Very well, I'll be back in a week or 2. The specifics will depend on the final examination. Sex reassignment surgery wasn't a single surgery, but a series of surgeries, adjustments, and recovery. It took much longer than Renbaqian had expected. It had been half a year since she had been sent there, and she had finally heard some good news. From now on, Ning Kaichen was dead, and there was only Ning Kaichen left. Not bad. Ren Baqian nodded. What happened to the girl you mentioned the other day? At the mention of this, Ren Wanyan became excited. A great success. Even though he was on the other end of the phone, Ren Baqian could imagine his excited expression as he danced with joy. Go online and take a look. The whole world has been shaken by us. Ren Wanyan laughed loudly. Ren Baqian turned on his very old computer, casually opened a web portal, and saw a report about that thing. An epic-making product. Ren Baqian had previously obtained the mind control technology from the nation and handed it over to Ren Wanyan. It had been more than 3 years on Earth. At first, Ren Wanyan only wanted to make the first epic-making game. He recruited various people to set up the New World Software Company. However, as time progressed, their ideas and ambitions grew. Not only did they want to make an epic-making game, but they also wanted to create a second world for mankind. In this period where the emergence of martial arts had caused changes in society, this product had a great effect on alleviating the pressure on the government. It allowed many energetic people to put their excess energy into the game, so the country strongly supported it. Because of this, the game that was originally planned to be released in 2 years had yet to be completed after more than 3 years. Although this project was a bottomless pit that burned money, Ren Baqian didn't mind. After all, he was different from others. He had the great interest-free loan method. Putting aside his connections, it would be easy to get a loan for this world-changing project. However, it was also a waste to keep this technology in their hands and never see the light of day. At the same time, some domestic and foreign companies and media also found out some news, which increased the pressure on this young company. At this time, someone proposed a new idea. It was to use this technology to create another game or virtual experience. It allowed people to experience all kinds of products on the e-commerce platform without leaving their homes. They could experience the pros and cons of each product before making a purchase. Mind control technology not only included the transmission of brain waves, but also the reception and feedback. A head-mounted device could allow people to directly experience the vast sea of products on the internet, and they could also get a more realistic feeling. For example, the effect of clothes and shoes on the back, whether they were comfortable, and even simulated the environment to get the effects of some common environments, such as windproof, waterproof, warm, and so on. Think about it. If a northerner bought a pair of winter boots, but the boots were designed for the southern weather, they would freeze within 2 minutes of wearing them. This situation would never happen again. Some products used all kinds of data to illustrate how good the product was, only to find that it fell far short of expectations after getting it. This situation would also never happen again. For example, the size of the product was too big or too small. Nowadays, most people bought products through the internet. They only saw the product in pictures and then bought it. There were too many unsatisfactory situations. However, this product from New World Software could change the situation. Ren Wanyan and the company's staff spent a year on it. They worked with e-commerce platforms and some e-commerce companies to collect all kinds of data. This time, they launched the results, which included the products of hundreds of businesses. It was named Life. The name was very low, but once it was launched, it shocked the whole world. There were all kinds of praises on the internet. It was conceivable that the sales of the businesses that had previously worked with them would increase significantly. Those who had previously refused to provide data and products would probably regret it now. In the future, anyone who wanted to buy a product would mostly use this simulation software to experience the product before deciding whether to buy it or not. Products without data in this simulation software would definitely receive a cold reception in the market. It would even reach the point where when new products were launched in the future, they would take the initiative to ask New World Software to input data into it. This would also be the source of huge profits in the future. Not to mention, this product had huge potential to be expanded in the future. For example, housing design, renovation design, clothing design, and new product development. There were too many functions that could be expanded into it. It could be said that with this product alone, New World Software had become one of the most eye-catching companies in the whole world. What attracted more attention was that through this simulation software and the virtual control helmet, the whole world was guessing how far virtual games and products in the virtual world were from them. Technically, it was completely achievable. It could even be said that life was a virtual world with limited functions. Ren Boqian was satisfied after browsing the information on the internet. He had to admit that this was the right way to work with e-commerce companies. According to Wan Yin, the employee who made this suggestion was a woman. The reason was that she had received a delivery the day before. After trying it on, she found it extremely ugly, so she came up with this idea. Ren Boqian also saw the photos sent by Wan Yin on his phone. He actually wanted to say that this really wasn't the responsibility of the other party's product. After thinking for a moment, Ren Boqian connected to Ren Wanyan again and asked, "When you make games, do you need various mechanical principles and motion feedback? Have you considered making a virtual arena? There is an arena in the game we designed. In another year, the game will be available," Ren Wanyan said subconsciously. "Not that kind, but a completely realistic one. A character will be created according to everyone's physical condition in reality and fight with others in the arena." Ren Boqian voiced his thoughts. With the popularization of the body-nourishing technique, more and more ordinary people will have all kinds of conflicts because of their gradually increasing strength. Some of the conflicts are due to the expansion of their strength after mastering it. Another reason is that they don't know where they stand and can't understand the strength they have. Nowadays, in order to ensure social order, the country will definitely crack down on violence. However, it's better to let it go than to stop it. There must be a place where they can measure their strength. A place where they can compete with others, train, and vent their anger without getting hurt will definitely have a good market. Moreover, through the changes in everyone's data, it will be easier to find those talented practitioners who have been overlooked for various reasons. But in that case, the martial arts centers and Wuji City. Ren Wanyan's thoughts were opened by these words, and the first thing he thought of was whether the martial arts centers and Wuji City would be affected. There will only be benefits and no disadvantages. After all, virtual reality is virtual reality, and reality is reality, Ren Boqian said faintly. Moreover, we can also use this platform to host fighting competitions all over the world and make it a global competition. I understand now. I'll make the arrangements and get people to prepare. Ren Wanyan began to get excited. Well, while you're at it, arrange for the move. It's time to move to Wuji City, Ren Boqian said. Now that the construction of Wuji City had been completed and was gradually starting to prosper, it was a more suitable place than Shanghai. After all, it would be his base camp. He could arrange for a large number of experts to move there. After making all the arrangements, Ren Boqian sat in a chair and spaced out for a while. Suddenly, he heard the noise of the winged cavalry warriors downstairs. Chapter 870. I personally felt sorry for the fate of this character. A girl who didn't do anything wrong shouldn't have such a future. However, a novel is a novel, and a personal opinion is a personal opinion. In fact, I already had an idea about the future of this character, but after thinking about it carefully, I couldn't make up my mind about the ending of this character. First of all, forget about the motorcycle gang. The Empress is my biological daughter. Now, there were 3 choices. First, accept her. She definitely wouldn't have a public identity and wouldn't let the Empress know. Her identity wasn't very glorious, and her future wasn't very bright either. However, it was relatively a better choice. At least there would be someone watching her until she grew old, and she would also have children. At least she wouldn't have nothing. Second, commit suicide. For such a character, committing suicide might be a good ending. However, the Empress would definitely be affected. This character was the Empress of Earth. Third, be killed by the Empress. The Empress would break through. The Empress is pregnant, and the consequences of this choice are unknown. I haven't thought about it yet. Fourth, grow. Give this character room to grow. According to a hidden setting in this book, the fate of the same person in all parallel worlds would have a maximum value. If the fate of the person in one world was high, the fate of the person in another world would be low. If both the Empress and Qi Jiayu had high fate, the fate of the person in the other world would be very low. Of course, this didn't matter, as the person in the other world wouldn't appear. However, in the later stages, when she grew up, both the Empress and Renbachian would be affected. Alright, let the readers vote for these 4 choices. You can leave a comment at the bottom of this chapter, or you can like the votes of others. There won't be any plot involving her in these 2 days. I will decide her future based on the results of the votes. By the way, many people think that the protagonist and the author are similar in many aspects. Many people think that Renbachian's worldview is my worldview, but most of the time, it isn't. Don't forget that the protagonist of my previous book was the abbot. His personality and worldview were completely opposite from Renbachian's, from the beginning to the end. I like to let the style of the protagonist change according to his personality and experiences. I can't rule out some of the details, but in general, it's like this. Personally, I prefer this. Chapter 871. Chao Rong jogged on the sidewalk of Wuji City, sweating while admiring the scenery on both sides of the road. Even though he had been here for a week, the excitement in his heart hadn't diminished at all. Chao Rong was born in a small town in the northeast and later enrolled in the police academy. Due to his excellent physical fitness and mind, he was among the best in the academy. After graduation, he directly entered the criminal police detachment in his hometown. If it wasn't for a person, it wouldn't have been impossible for him to enter the criminal police force given his circumstances. After returning to his hometown, his career in the brigade was smooth sailing. He solved several major cases in succession, earned 2 first-class merits, and 3 second-class merits. At the age of 30, he was promoted to the position of deputy brigade leader. At the same time, he turned his childhood sweetheart into his wife. It could be said that he was proud of his life. If he continued like this, he should be able to become a brigade leader within 10 years. Whether he could advance further after that would depend on luck and opportunity. However, such achievements were already something to be proud of for a young man from an ordinary family. However, 4 years ago, he was selected to undergo training in the province, which changed everything. At first, he didn't pay much attention to that training. However, after he went there, he realized that it was different from the past. Cultivation method number 327 was something he had obtained during that training session. A year later, the country began to implement the 15th set of fitness qigong. The era of national cultivation had officially begun. Thanks to his outstanding physique and innate talent, he used 4 years to cross the boundary that had stopped countless people, and reached the strength of the lower mystic stage. At this point, he realized that this level of strength had another name, Manwul level. Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow were the current classifications. For ordinary people, as long as they had the data of a healthy adult man, they would be considered to be at the Yellow level. The next level was the Black level. Having reached the Black level, he was very clear about his own strength. In the city, he could deal with at least 3 or 4 of his previous selves with guns. He had inquired about how powerful the Earth level was, but he had never heard of anyone reaching this level. He wondered if there were any Earth level experts in this world. If someone who had just reached the Black level could already have such strength, wouldn't those Earth level experts be inhuman? After reaching the black level, there were two paths in front of him. The first was to enter the Armed Forces Command, which was under preparation, and directly become the Deputy Bureau Chief. The other path was to enter a new department, the Armed Forces Command, and move to Wuji City. After a brief consideration, he chose the second option. This was not only because he had spent most of his time cultivating after becoming a member of the Armed Forces Command, but also because of the extremely mysterious Wuji City that was only known to ordinary people. When he brought his wife and 5-year-old son here a week ago, he immediately knew he had made the right choice. Wuji City was a city where everything was in order, yet there was something strange about it. Monks, Taoist priests, martial artists dressed in traditional Han clothing or other ancient costumes, military elites, and members of the Armed Forces Command like himself were everywhere in the city. At the same time, he also heard another name of the city from these people, Central City. Just like the political center of the imperial capital and the economic center of the demonic city, this city would be the center of the martial artists in the future. Moreover, unlike the other two cities, this city would be the center of the entire world's martial artists. Only those who had reached a certain standard of strength could bring their family members in, and they would be allocated a house of 140 square meters. Ordinary people, other than the carefully selected staff and government personnel, could not become a member of this city, regardless of whether they were rich or powerful. Just this point alone was enough to make him identify with this city. Even though he had become the director of the Armed Forces Command, he was still limited to the common people of a small city. However, it was completely different here. The people around him were all people like him, the most outstanding people in the whole of China. In the future, this would be the center of the entire world. At the very least, among the people he knew, including his elementary school classmates, colleagues, and other elites he met during the training at the criminal police force, he was the only one who had come here. He was already in a different world from them. Although the current population here was only tens of thousands of people, and the entire city still seemed empty, this situation would change year by year. He believed that it would be completely different in 10 years at time. Chao Rong thought about this as he jogged. At the same time, he would greet the people he met along the way. After turning a corner, he arrived at a main road. This was Zone C, which was very close to the center of Wuji City. According to some people, this was within the second ring road. Going further in, apart from various government agencies, military departments, plazas, stadiums, hospitals, bustling commercial areas, and hotel areas, there were almost no residential areas. The reason why he said almost no residential areas was because there was a peculiar place on the opposite side of the road to his left. Along the road was a row of high-rise buildings that had not yet been put into use, including hotels, shopping malls, supermarkets, cinemas, and a Yao Dojo. Behind these high-rise buildings was a commercial street, a park, an arena, and a villa area. The reason why he said this place was peculiar was that although there were very few people in Wuji City, almost all the areas near the third ring road had been put into use. Only this stretch of buildings was located in Zone C. Although there were occasionally people taking care of them, they had never been put into use. Later, he heard a rumor that this area was privately owned. This news left him speechless. Who could own such a large area in Wuji City? He had deliberately run one round, and this area was not small. It was a full 5 square kilometers. This was Wuji City, not some small city. How could someone own such a large private area? He had also specially inquired with his colleagues in the Armed Forces Command and concluded that this area was indeed privately owned. He was not the only one curious. Almost everyone was curious as to who could own such an area in Wuji City. However, no one knew who it was. However, there were rumors that the person was the boss of the Yao Dojo. After everyone started practicing, he had heard about this dojo when he looked up information on the internet and watched a few videos. What surprised him the most was that there were many manual experts in the videos. At that time, he only felt that the strength displayed by the other party was terrifying. After all, amateurs enjoyed the show, while experts recognized the artistry. Even though he was not very strong at that time, he could tell that it was extraordinary. It was not until he entered the manual level 2 years later that he realized what the things in the videos represented. However, after he arrived here and inquired about the area in Zone C, he heard an even more shocking rumor that there was an Earth-level expert in the Yao Dojo. This news shocked him. As far as he knew, the number 1 expert in the Armed Forces Command was only at the upper level of the Black level. It was said that he was a martial arts expert before and had entered the Black level 7 years ago. Now, he was only at the upper level of the Black level. The upper, middle, and lower levels of the Heaven, Earth, and Black levels correspond to the upper, middle, and lower levels of the Spirit Wheel, Earth Wheel, and Manual levels. The authenticity of this news was unknown, but if it was true, it would be too shocking. Even the Armed Forces Command did not have an Earth-level expert, but one of them actually appeared in a dojo. This also made him even more curious about the identity of the owner of this dojo. Chao Rong, who was running, suddenly felt a little strange. There seemed to be more people on this road today. Although it was within the second ring road, there were usually not many people on this road. There were only a dozen people within 100 meters. Chapter 872. Then, he noticed that there were some people standing under the largest building across the road. However, he didn't see them because they were blocked by the trees on both sides of the road. Someone important is coming. Chao Rong immediately reacted. Could it be the owner of that area? Such a large number of people definitely can't be an ordinary person. Even if they aren't the owner of that area, they must be high-ranking personnel. Are these people on this side of the road guards? Chao Rong observed for a while and immediately dispelled this idea. This was because the people on this side of the road weren't vigilant and seemed to be observing the people on the opposite building. Furthermore, these people were monks and Taoist priests. If they were guards, they definitely wouldn't choose an image that was so easily noticed. The monks and Taoist priests in Wuji City were different from those in other places. All of them were at the manual level. Before the emergence of martial arts, these people were mostly experts in some sections. After the emergence of martial arts, they took advantage of the opportunity to break through to the manual level. Although they were all at the manual level, Chao Rong was very clear that these people were much stronger than him. However, if I have a gun in my hand, they won't be a match for me. Chao Rong thought to himself as he gradually stopped in his tracks. That is. Chao Rong suddenly stopped in his tracks. In front of him, a man in his 40s was standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking at the opposite side of the road. If he remembered correctly, this man was one of the top experts in the Armed Forces Command. Although Chao Rong hadn't been here for a long time, he happened to meet him. Later, he learned from the people next to him that this man was one of the top experts in the Armed Forces Command. Chao Rong didn't expect him to be here. So many people were waiting here just to see this person. Who exactly was he? Chao Rong, you are here too. A very thin young man walked over with a smile. I didn't expect you to be so well informed even though you haven't been in Wuji City for long. Ding Hao. Chao Rong knew that his doubts had been answered when he saw the person. Ding Hao was said to be a disciple of a sect who had been in Wuji City for 2 years. He was talented and had excellent strength. He was also slick and well-informed. When Chao Rong first arrived in Wuji City and went to the Armed Forces Command to go through the formalities, he happened to meet Ding Hao and obtained a lot of useful information from him. Currently, there were 3 major factions in the United Armed Forces Command. The first faction consisted of people like him who were originally in criminal investigations or other agencies, the second faction consisted of idle personnel who came from sects, and the third faction consisted of personnel who had left the military for various reasons. Due to their close backgrounds and the fact that they were in a group, the members of these three forces were more familiar with each other. In fact, the most powerful force in Wuji City was not the Armed Forces Command, but the military. There were only about 1,300 manual experts in the Armed Forces Command, and it was said that there were more than 5,000 in the military. In addition, there were some miscellaneous personnel who didn't join either the Armed Forces Command or the military. Most of them came from sects, thought highly of themselves, and weren't weak. However, there were only about 100 of them. Aren't you thinking too much? I'm just passing by. This is my daily jogging route. What's going on here today? Chao Rong asked with a smile. Hearing this, Ding Hao showed a strange look. You don't know. I thought you heard about it too. It is said that a group of Earth-level experts will come today. These people are the best in the city. When they heard the news, they all wanted to see what an Earth-level expert looks like. Ding Hao raised his chin and gestured to the people on the roadside. He continued, to be honest, I'm also very curious. You have to know that neither the Armed Forces Command nor the military have an Earth-level expert. I wonder how talented they are to reach the Earth level in a few years. Chao Rong couldn't help but be envious. A few years. That's not necessarily true. Ding Hao revealed a mysterious smile. What do you mean? How did these martial arts techniques appear? They couldn't have fallen from the sky, right? Weren't they developed by scientists? Chao Rong was slightly surprised. Ding Hao shrugged his shoulders. Who knows? The two of them chatted for a while. Suddenly, Ding Hao's eyes lit up. They're here. He saw a long line of new cars coming from afar. Chao Rong roughly glanced at them and estimated that there were between 50 and 60 of them. In just a few minutes, the convoy gradually approached. Ding Hao silently counted in his heart and realized that there were 56 cars. When the convoy stopped, everyone on one side of the road stared at the other side of the road. Following a series of car doors opening, 2 or 3 people got out of each car. Most of them were in their 20s or 30s. Strength. Chao Rong observed them and was shocked. They were all manual experts. It might not be easy to tell if they were manual experts if they didn't get close, but Chao Rong had been a criminal investigator for so many years. His observation skills weren't comparable to others. Regardless of strength, speed, coordination, or self-control, a manual expert wasn't comparable to an ordinary person. His movements were as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water, and it was pleasing to the eye. As long as one observed a little, one would be able to discern something from his movements. When the doors of the dozens of cars in the middle opened, everyone's eyes froze. They saw burly men getting out of the cars. Even though they were separated by a road, they could still feel the fierce and murderous aura coming from them. There was also a faint sense of oppression coming from them. These people, are they Earth-level experts? Even though they were separated by a road and the other party didn't even pay attention to them, Chao Rong's head began to drip with sweat. These people are very scary. Chao Rong whispered. This was the intuition that he had gained from experiencing life and death. His intuition told him that these people were extremely dangerous. As for their strength, the difference was too great, so he couldn't tell. However, he believed that there were definitely Earth-level experts among them, or even all of them. There were more than 20 of them. Was it possible for more than 20 Earth-level experts? They are indeed scary. The smile on Ding Hao's face disappeared and was replaced with a solemn expression. Just now, a person glanced in this direction, and it gave me a creepy feeling. Those people are the legendary Earth-level experts. Subsequently, a bald man with no eyebrows got out of the car. He was wearing simple sportswear and a white t-shirt. Although he wasn't as strong as the previous people, he still made those who noticed him feel a sense of oppression. And that person's position was in the center of everyone. As long as everyone looked at that person's position after getting out of the car, they would know his identity. He must be the most important person in this group. He looks familiar. Chao Rong muttered in his heart after seeing the other party's face clearly. He was very confident in his memory. As long as he had seen someone before, he would never forget them, especially such a special person. Where had he seen him before? He waited until everyone on the opposite side of the road entered the building, but he was still thinking. The people on this side of the road also began to gradually disperse. These people came with all kinds of motives, but after seeing those people, no one dared to go forward. The other party's aura made them feel extreme danger. One had to know that there was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. There might be people who wanted to see the strength of an Earth-level expert. However, just the aura alone made so many experts in the city not dare to go forward, which showed the power of the other party. Countless people swore in their hearts that they would also reach this level. When Chao Rong woke up, there were very few people on this road, and even Ding Hao was nowhere to be seen. Chao Rong wasn't in the mood to continue jogging, so he walked back while thinking. He went through all the people in his memory, from the most recent memory to the past. When he was about to reach home, his whole body suddenly froze in place. A wanted poster and a person's figure gradually overlapped. Ren Baqian. His high school classmate. His appearance was above average, his family background was ordinary, his personality was gentle, but not strange. In short, he was an extremely ordinary classmate. Chao Rong had never participated in the class reunions after graduation, and no one cared. However, when he later received news that it was an AAA level wanted poster, he was very surprised and even contacted all the classmates he could contact to ask about him. However, the wanted poster was inexplicably cancelled later. The internal network of the police station didn't find any news of his arrest, and it seemed that his wanted poster was directly cancelled, which was extremely rare. Because of these two incidents, he had a very deep impression of this old classmate. The person just now had his hair and eyebrows removed, and he was a little chubbier. Other than that, his height, face shape, eyes, nose, and lips were very similar to his old classmate. It could even be said that they were exactly the same. At the thought of this, Chao Rong hurried home, quickly flipped through his graduation photos, found that person, and recalled the person he saw just now. Indeed, they were the same. However, other than the same appearance and height, their movements, temperament, and other aspects were completely different. What are you doing? Looking through the photos as soon as you came back, just to take a look at your high school graduation photo, a woman in her 30s asked curiously. Do you remember our high school classmate named Ren Baqian? Chao Rong asked after regaining his senses. Yes, he had a younger brother named Ren Wanyan. You even said that he was a 1,000-year-old tortoise. The woman laughed. I remember that you mentioned him a few years ago. He became a wanted criminal, right? I was quite surprised. I never thought that he would become a wanted criminal. Don't mention the wanted criminal anymore. The wanted poster has long been cancelled, and he isn't a wanted criminal. Chao Rong shook his head. Then why did you think of him? I just saw a person who looked like him. There are many people who look like him, the woman said indifferently. Chao Rong put his things back and sat on the sofa in a daze. Indeed, there were many people who looked like him, and he might be thinking too much. He must be thinking too much. How could they be the same person? No matter how he thought about it, it was impossible. Even if Ren Baqian could come to Wuji City, it was impossible for him to be surrounded by more than 20 legendary Earth-class experts and hundreds of man-will experts. Recommended new book by an excellent author, National Martial Cultivation. Chapter 873. Ren Baqian finally arrived at the headquarters of Wuji City. He had learned a little from Ren Wanyan and Ding Jia over the years, but this was his first time here. Not only did he bring along the winged cavalry, but he also brought along more than 100 core disciples. Most of the disciples from the inner sect and above would also rush over after finishing their business. This would be his headquarters and the headquarters of the martial arts center in the future. Ren Baqian headed straight for the roof. The top 2 floors of this building were his residences. The 37th floor covered an area of more than 10,000 square meters. It included a swimming pool, a cinema, a training ground, a small playground, a living room, a supermarket. This was a must, more than a dozen suites, a few servants' quarters, a kitchen, and most importantly, a hanging garden that covered an area of thousands of square meters and was designed in the style of a Jiangnan waterside pavilion. As for the 38th floor, it was only 3,000 square meters. It mainly included his and the Empress's bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, baby's room, swimming pool, and a home theater, about the size of a normal theater. Basically, it would take an hour to go around these 2 floors. Ren Baqian was very satisfied. After all, compared to the palace, the previous villa was too small and wasn't even as big as the palace. It didn't matter to him, but it wasn't worthy of the Empress's status. Furthermore, he was going to have a son. He was going to have a son. He was going to have a son. His and the Empress's child would definitely be alive and kicking, right? There should be a bigger place for him to play to his heart's content. Ren Baqian only knew what alive and kicking meant after the child was born. Ren Baqian was a little anxious to go back when he thought of the Empress. However, before that, he got someone to look for Shenfeng. "Boss, are you looking for me?" After 9 years, Shenfeng had changed a lot. Shenfeng was married. Although she still had her refreshing short hair and unisex attire, she was much more feminine. "Did you leak the information to Qi Jiayu?" Ren Baqian's face darkened. Besides Shenfeng, it was impossible for Qi Jiayu to know that he was the mastermind. "Boss, you didn't pay attention to her. She's actually very smart." "It's not surprising that she guessed some things," Shenfeng replied seriously. "You also said that I guessed some things. If I can guess that it's someone I met twice 8 years ago, I would be a deity." Ren Baqian's face turned cold. Shenfeng looked at Ren Baqian, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Boss, if you want to punish me, just punish me. I have been paying attention to her all this while. I know what she's thinking and understand her feelings. After all, I'm also a woman, and it's inevitable that I have sympathy." Ren Baqian looked at Shenfeng and sighed. "Go and get $1 million. Consider it your severance pay. You've done well these past few years." Shenfeng's expression changed slightly, but she knew that this was normal. In fact, she had already guessed that this was one of the most likely outcomes, and it was also a relatively good one. He bowed to Ren Baqian. "Goodbye, boss." After Shenfeng left, Ren Baqian sat on the sofa, feeling somewhat vexed. He had long known that Shenfeng was a citizen of the country, but he did not care. Moreover, she had been sitting very well. However, what Shenfeng had done had placed him in a predicament. After sitting for a while, he turned around. He returned to Pingle Park, where there were 2 pandas and a Ting Ting. The Roaring Emperor would often come here. After changing his clothes, he went to Yaohua Palace and saw that the Empress was dressing up. Ren Baqian walked over, hugged her from behind, and pressed his cheek against hers. The vexation of the past few days suddenly dissipated. After enjoying the tenderness for a moment, Ren Baqian took the wooden comb from Hong Wan and began to groom the Empress. As he combed, he softly recited, "The hills overlap, the clouds at the temples shine like snow." After waiting for a while, the Empress realized that Ren Baqian had stopped reciting and said, "There seems to be more. Too lazy to draw a moth's eyebrows, too late to do makeup and wash up." Reflecting on the flowers in front and behind the mirror, the faces of the flowers reflect each other. Renbochin didn't read the last sentence, combed the Empress's hair, and coiled it into a bun. He carefully admired it and felt that it was pretty artistic. Hong Wan should do it. The Empress said faintly as she looked at the chicken coop above her head in the mirror. I can't go to court like this. Hong Wan coiled the Empress's hair while Renbochin sat at the side and said, Your Majesty, do you still remember that person who looks like you? Didn't you say that you might need her for a breakthrough? I have some impression of her, the Empress replied. After all, Earth isn't Deo, and it's impossible for everything to be under control. No one can say for sure what will happen. If she dies accidentally, I'm afraid that it will affect Your Majesty's plans. Why don't you kill her now? Renbochin said faintly. His heart was cold and full of killing intent. Why did you suddenly mention this? The Empress looked at Renbochin through the mirror strangely and casually said, If she dies, then so be it. If I want to break through, do I still need external help? If it weren't for you, I would have already broken through. The youngest aboriginal since ancient times, Longevity Heaven. This title isn't bad, and I quite like it. As for her, I only felt that she could be of some use at that time. If you didn't mention it, I'm afraid I would have forgotten about it. If Your Majesty breaks through to Longevity Heaven, I'm afraid that I'll really have to devote myself to it until my death, Renbochin said with a smile. The Empress rolled her eyes at him. Then, he thought for a while and said, Actually, it's nothing. I just suddenly remembered when I saw her on Earth. The Empress looked at him in the mirror and said, You're hiding something from me. You had a murderous aura just now, which isn't your usual self. After saying this, she looked at herself in the mirror and waited for Renbochin's answer. Your Majesty planted a trace of your soul with me. Every time I see her, I naturally have a murderous intent. When I mentioned her just now, I remembered the feeling when I saw her. Renbochin smiled calmly. Only then did the Water Empress feel relieved. Then, a sweet smile appeared on her face. Splitting that strand of my soul was very painful for me. That strand of divine soul has been intertwined with your divine soul for generations to come. Then, her expression changed, and she said fiercely, If you let me down, I'll destroy that trace of your soul. That's murdering your husband. Renbochin pretended to be shocked. Humph. The Empress snorted, thought about it, and talked about Qi Jiayu. She sighed and said, However, the world is really mysterious. When I saw that person, I also had a murderous intent. As you said, there's a certain connection between me and her. They're obviously two different worlds, but they're related to me. However, I'm the heaven, and she's the earth. Although that person is related to me, there's no need to care about her. Renbochin nodded and put this matter aside. After the Empress went to court, he concentrated and continued to be busy. The first was the location of the new city. In the past 2 months, Renbochin had already sent people around Lon City to understand the surrounding situation. There was a rather suitable plain about half a day's journey southeast of Lon City. There were even 2 rivers flowing through it. The water flow was gentle, and there wouldn't be any problems even during the rainy season when the water level rose. It was suitable for living, easy to obtain water, and not difficult to build roads. The scenery was also very good. Chapter 874. In addition to being in the palace and the school, most people would have to deal with all sorts of things. After a long time, they would definitely feel suffocated. Otherwise, the ancient emperors would love to travel when they had nothing to do. Unfortunately, they had to deal with a lot of things every day. Secondly, the identity of the emperor was too important. Going out wasn't a simple trip, and it cost a lot of money. As a result, there was another situation, traveling incognito. When they had nothing to do, they would disguise themselves and visit a brothel. For example, that's so and so again. They left behind many stories that would be passed down through the ages. For example, Zhao Fian and Li Shishir. However, there were also some who had a bad start. Emperor Tongji visited a brothel and died. This showed that, I'm going off topic, I'm talking about traveling. It was troublesome for an ordinary emperor to travel, but in a martial arts world, there was no need to consider these problems if the emperor was a cheat. For example, when the Empress went out, there was a guard of honor most of the time, but that was only to show her noble status. If something really happened, it wasn't certain who would be protecting who. Therefore, when he had nothing to do, he would often travel light. For example, now that the Empress was riding Qi Shui and Ren Baqian was riding the Crow General, they were followed by Tong Xinye and a group of officials from the Ministry of Works. In addition, there were 20 to 30 imperial bodyguards. The Empress sat on the back of Qi Shui and looked at the lush fields as she suddenly asked, "Why do the crops in this field seem different?" Although the Empress didn't know much about farming, she had seen pigs run before. Most of the fields she had seen before were hundreds of acres of the same crop. At this moment, she was curious when she saw two crops intertwined in a field. It's sugar cane and sweet potatoes. Sugar cane takes more than 10 months to grow. It would be a pity to leave the field empty during the seedling stage, and other crops can be planted. Ren Baqian understood after a glance. He was the one who informed the Ministry of Works about this. He had wanted to make sugar cane for a long time. The sugar in this world was mainly extracted from beets, which was too inefficient and expensive. After changing to sugar cane, Ren Baqian felt that he could open a sugar factory. Sugar cane wasn't any slower than glass products and spices. At least, he was confident that he could dig out Lin Chaola's treasury. Lin Chaola had stayed in Qingxin Palace Hall for so many years and didn't have much to spend, so she should have saved up some money. Sugarcane, is that the kind of crop that you said can extract sugar from? The Empress was obviously very interested in the weed-like sugarcane sprouts in the field. Or rather, he was very interested in sugar. The value of this thing isn't limited to making sugar. Ren Baqian laughed. Your Majesty should have seen the cars on Earth, but we can't find oil here, so we have to develop other technologies, such as biodiesel. However, there is another very convenient alternative, which is ethanol. Large amounts of ethanol could be extracted from both sugar cane and sweet potatoes. Although Ren Baqian had decided to develop diesel, ethanol was equally important. The main reason was that these two types of fuels had different ignition points, densities, and development directions. It's like the difference between gasoline and diesel. Nowadays, Dayo's technology was advancing by leaps and bounds. Even the steam engine wasn't widely used and could only be seen in some factories. However, Ren Baqian was already preparing to set up a laboratory to study the internal combustion engine. After all, with the internal combustion engine, the transportation time and manpower would be greatly reduced. Even farming would require less manpower. Coupled with the cement roads that were being built, the entire Dayo would be able to develop rapidly. Can ethanol be made into wine? The Empress asked after thinking for a while. Although the Empress was ignorant and incompetent, she didn't know much about this area, she still paid some attention to things that interested her. At the very least, she knew that ethanol was alcohol. If the concentration of ethanol is high enough, it can be used as fuel. Ren Baqian gave an example, water of life. The Empress's expression immediately became strange. She looked at Ren Baqian with narrowed eyes and didn't know what she was thinking. A few days ago, after she and Ren Baqian left the wedding, that bunch of scoundrels almost burned down Xichen Palace Hall. Moreover, Lian Liang even tore down half a wall. Thinking of this, the Empress started to feel suffocated. During her wedding, they set fire to the palace and destroyed it. The cause of that incident was the water of life. And the main culprit who took out the water of life was Renbachien. At this moment, Renbachien naturally didn't realize that his loose tongue reminded the Empress of what he had done. He was in high spirits as he introduced the uses of the sweet potatoes and sugar cane. Ever since the introduction of high-yield crops like sweet potatoes, and pumpkins, the price of food in Deo had dropped significantly over the past 3 years. In other words, the price of crops like sweet potatoes was low enough. The monthly income of an ordinary person in Deo was 1.5 to 2 taels of silver, the salary of a soldier was 3 to 4 taels of silver, the salary of a low-ranking official was 6 taels of silver, and the winged cavalry warriors were paid 10 taels of silver. 1 tael of silver was equivalent to 1,200 copper coins. However, because Deo produced very little copper, there were more cases of trading broken silver. After all, the people of Deo weren't like the people of the Yun nation or Great Xia, who bought vegetables and meat in half a caddy. The people of the Yun nation said, "Give me 2 taels of meat. Give me 1 caddy of cabbage." Then, they threw out a handful of copper coins. The people of Deo said, "Give me 15 caddies of beef." Then, they went to another stall and said, "I'll exchange 1.5 caddies of beef for 1 caddy of beets." In Deo, beef was one of the cheapest foods and only cost 10 copper coins per caddy. Ordinary people had to eat 2 caddies of meat a day, and an adult's income was just enough to fill their stomachs. Fortunately, men and women were truly equal in Deo. Both men and women had to work to support their families, so they could barely fill their stomachs. This was also thanks to the low fertility of the people of Deo. If there were 7 or 8 people in a family, many would starve to death. Bones cost 3 copper coins per caddy. Mutton cost 12 copper coins per caddy. However, people couldn't just eat meat. Vegetables and grains were much more expensive. Salt cost 120 copper coins per caddy. Beets usually cost 25 to 30 copper coins per caddy. Edible wild vegetables cost about 20 copper coins per caddy. Coarse rice with stones in it cost 25 copper coins per caddy, and the black flour that gave off a sour smell cost 35 copper coins per caddy. As for the fragrant rice from the Yun nation and Great Xia, even ordinary officials couldn't afford it. It cost 250 copper coins per caddy, which was equivalent to 2 taels of silver per caddy. 1 caddy of meat was enough to fill one's stomach, but 4 caddies of grains and vegetables were needed. Therefore, the people of Deo were so poor that they could only eat meat. As 3 years passed, high-yielding crops like sweet potatoes and potatoes, which were harvested 2 to 3 times a year, began to impact the diet of the people. In Lon City, sweet potatoes cost 3 copper coins per caddy, and pumpkins and potatoes cost 4 copper coins. Coarse rice had risen to 35 copper coins per caddy. After discovering that it was easy to grow and didn't need to worry about it, many people directly planted sweet potatoes. As a result, the price of other grains became more expensive. However, the emergence of these high-yielding crops had greatly enriched the people's dining tables, and they no longer had to worry about hunger. After all, 1 caddy of sweet potatoes was equivalent to 1 caddy of mutton. The people's dining tables basically changed from stewed beef, roasted beef, and boiled beef to stewed beef with potatoes, stewed beef with sweet potatoes, and stewed beef with pumpkin. In this regard, Renbachien's contribution wasn't small. Chapter 875. In Deo, not only was food expensive, but all resources were also expensive. When Renbachien first arrived, salt cost 120 copper coins per tael. 50 copper coins for a tael of honey. Roughly brewed fruit wine, 100 copper coins per caddy. When Renbachien first arrived at the Beast Park, the caretaker treated him to hard liquor, inferior liquor, from the Yun nation, which cost 1 tael of silver per caddy. As for the other materials, such as linen cloth, 1 tael of silver each, brown cloth, 3 taels of silver each, and silk cloth, 30 taels of silver each. In this world, a horse was 4 zhang, which was equivalent to 13 meters. An ordinary person's monthly income was only enough to buy 1.5 bolts of sackcloth. In Dayou, ordinary people wore animal hides, and only those who were better off could wear sackcloth. Low-ranking officials could only wear 2 sets of clothes made of cloth all year round. Even if there was a hole in the clothes, they would feel heartache and gasp in shock. A few days ago, when Ren Baqin was chatting with Lin Mengxing, they talked about the situation of the people in the Yun nation. In this day and age, scholars were not ordinary people. There were very few commoners who could study. Most of the children of merchants and government officials had the opportunity to study. This was the case for Lin Mengxing. Although his family was not considered wealthy in the Yun nation, it was still considered wealthy. Logically speaking, such scholars were usually aloof from worldly affairs, but Lin Mengxing was very familiar with the lives of the common people, and could be considered an anomaly. The income of the people of the Yun nation was lower than that of the people of Dayou. After all, Dayou was vast and sparsely populated, and the resources per capita were much higher. Furthermore, ordinary people were at least at the manual level and had great strength. Whether it was farming or hunting, they were much better than the citizens of other countries. In the Yun nation, a manual expert's monthly income was at least 10 taels of silver. An earthwill expert's monthly salary would be at least 100 taels of silver if he were to work as a consecrator in the warlord's residence. On the other hand, Dayou's winged cavalry only paid 10 taels of silver a month. The monthly income of the people in the Yun nation was no more than 800 to 1,000 copper coins. In the Yun nation, 1 caddy of salt was only 100 copper coins. Brown rice was 8 copper coins per caddy, and coarse grain flour was 11 copper coins. This was 1/3 to 1/4 of the price in Dayou. On the other hand, the price of beef was 50 copper coins per caddy. The main reason was that the Yun nation was more involved in farming than herding. Even though the slaughter of cows wasn't prohibited like the Tang dynasty, they could still serve as a strong laborer. Therefore, they were quite expensive. A rooster costs 20 copper coins, and a hen costs 15 copper coins. 1 bolt of linen costs 300 copper coins, 1 bolt of linen costs 600 copper coins, 1 bolt of silk cost 2 taels of silver, and the satin cost 10 taels of silver. The prices of goods were only 1/3 to 1/4 of those in Dayou, and even 1/10 of those in Dayou. Their income was half that of the aboriginals. More importantly, they ate very little. Even though their fertility rate was slightly higher, with each family having 3 or 4 children, overall, their lives were still slightly better than that of the aboriginals. Of course, this was only slightly better, and it was even equivalent. This was because aboriginal commoners rarely fell sick. Most of their injuries were caused by hunting or fighting. The biggest cause of accidental death, other than dying in the mouth of wild beasts and being bitten or infected by wild beasts, was childbirth. On the other hand, the people of the Yun nation were completely ordinary people. When they were sick, they would go to the doctor if they had the money. If they didn't, they would just wait for death. In short, the common people of this era were just trying to survive and survive. The real difference was that there were many middle classes in the Yun nation. There were many merchants in the Yun nation, and it wasn't like ancient China, where merchants were ranked at the bottom. In the Yun nation, commerce was developed, and the status of merchants wasn't low. Small merchants and peddlers usually didn't have to worry about food and clothing. There were also many so-called wealthy squires, and there were even wealthy merchants who could hire earth-will experts. The living conditions of these people were very good. The standard of living of a middle-class wealthy family was much better than that of Tongzhinya. The wealthy merchants were even more extravagant. Due to the prevalence of merchants in the Yun nation, it catalyzed technological progress in various aspects. For example, smelting and textiles, they were much better than Great Xia. Zedong had once reported to the Empress that the Yun nation's continuous firing ballistae were a type of relatively advanced weapon in this era. From various aspects, the Yun nation had already seen the emergence of capitalism. As long as the Yun nation wasn't destroyed and continued along this path, it would only be a matter of time before it blossomed and bore fruit. Unfortunately, they met a socialist hammer like Renbaqian. Renbaqian felt that he had corrected their erroneous capitalistic path and led them to the socialist family. Don't ask about socialism. What about the Empress? This was a socialist feudal country with Dao's characteristics. Shouldn't the nation give him some commendation and at least let him join a party or something? It was fine to take a step back and join a group. Not the FFF group. Renbaqian thought about it and remembered that he was a member of the FFF before he came to Dao. After thinking about it for a while, he laughed first. Like a fool. The Empress rolled her eyes at him. She didn't see many people start to laugh foolishly after thinking about it. She couldn't be bothered with him and rode Qi Shui to the front. After less than half a day, everyone arrived at their destination. Standing on a hill, they could see a vast expanse in front of them that overlooked the entire plain. Two rivers meandered across the plains, encircling the grassland. Large herds of cattle and sheep wandered on the plains. There was also a small forest at the corner of the grassland. Most of the trees grew fruit trees. When Renbaqian came over, he tasted them. They tasted sweet, slightly sour, juicy, and pretty good. Is this the place? The Empress asked after stopping Qi Shui and looking down. The scenery isn't bad. This is the place. Renbaqian nodded and said, especially those two rivers. They are generally between 10 to 20 meters deep, which is enough for boats to travel. Furthermore, they won't flood during the rainy season. The two rivers converged downstream to form a large river that flowed through the border between the Yun nation and the Qin nation. If the new city is built here, we can save a lot of effort in transporting goods. Relying on river transportation, trade will be more prosperous. Renbaqian calmed himself down and said, the new city that I envision doesn't have city walls. It's just a plain that can be expanded in all directions. In Renbaqian's vision, the new city would sooner or later reach a scale of millions or even tens of millions of people, and it was extremely important to facilitate expansion. You don't want the city walls. It doesn't seem appropriate, Tong Jingye said subconsciously when he heard the last sentence. What's wrong with that? Renbaqian asked. Tong Jingye was stunned by this question. What's wrong with it? They were afraid that wild beasts and enemies would attack them, so the city walls could play a defensive role. Under normal circumstances, this was indeed the case. But this was a plain, and there were no ferocious beasts. As an ancient race, they were never afraid of others attacking them. It had always been them beating up others. Thinking about it this way, it did not seem to be inappropriate. Sir Tong's thinking has been solidified by his previous understanding. Others need city walls, but we don't. What's more, which country in history had ever used a city wall to defend against an enemy? This is the capital, not the border. If the enemy can reach here, it doesn't matter if there are city walls or not. Renbaqian laughed. That's the logic, but I still feel a little strange. Tong Jingye scratched his head. If we want to achieve the level of an industrialized society, a large population is essential. We are different from other countries that develop normally. We incubate technology in Lon City and radiate it to the surrounding areas with Lon City as the center. We use the fastest speed to advance our technology. Therefore, building such a super capital is the best choice. Lon City, for example, has a population of only tens of thousands. This population is too small, and we can't recruit people after building a few factories. A small population didn't just mean that they couldn't recruit workers. There were also fewer laborers, teenagers of the right age, and students. Simply put, a small population meant a small potential. However, if there are more people, there won't be enough food, and it will be difficult to transport them. We won't be able to support them. Tang Xingye continued. In this era, the food in the city mainly came from the surroundings. On one hand, it was because of low productivity and low output. On the other hand, it was difficult to transport food, and it would cost too much to transport. A city like Lan City could generally support a population of more than 100,000 people. If it was the capital of a country, it could even reach a population of hundreds of thousands or millions. Chapter 876. Be careful, Your Majesty. There are strange fish in this river, Renbaqian shouted at the Empress. It wasn't just this river. There were many strange fish in all the rivers in Dayo. Giant crocodiles were one of the more common ones, and there were many others with strange appearances. For example, this river. Before Renbaqian could finish his sentence, more than a dozen black snake-like creatures shot out of the river like arrows. These creatures were about the length of a forearm and as thick as 2 fingers. They had mouths full of fangs, and their jaws could reach 180 degrees like a snake's. The Empress didn't even look at them. She waved her hand in the air, and those creatures exploded in the air, spraying red blood everywhere. The next scene could make someone with trypophobia faint. Hundreds of similar creatures shot out of the river and fought for the flesh in the air. There were also countless black heads on the surface of the water. They were so densely packed that it gave people goosebumps. The Empress's face turned cold. She waved her hand in the air, and the hundreds of creatures in the air turned into a rain of blood. The river's surface sank, and the creatures in the water exploded one after another. The entire river was dyed red. The river was quiet for a few minutes. Then, countless strange black fish appeared in the water and frantically devoured the flesh of their own kind. Your Majesty, it's dangerous. Renbaqian pulled the Empress's arm. What's the danger? The Empress didn't care, but she still frowned and asked, why are there so many of them? Renbaqian forcefully pulled the Empress's arm back. He grabbed her waist and pulled her back. He hugged her thighs and pulled her back. It felt like he was pulling a metal pillar. It didn't budge at all. What are you doing? The Empress turned her head, put her hands under Renbaqian's armpits, and then lifted him up. High up, a graceful lady in red with her hands under her armpits was lifting a man who weighed more than 100 kilograms. To outsiders, this scene didn't seem out of place. I'm trying to see if I can move you. In fact, it's too dangerous here, and I want to pull you back a little. Renbaqian opened his arms and mimicked the action on the Titanic. Then, he was thrown to the ground by the Empress. What danger? The Empress scoffed. The danger doesn't come from those strange fish. It comes from those parasites on their bodies. Renbaqian came up and put his hand into her clothes. Paw. The Empress unceremoniously made a pig's trotter. Your Majesty, can you check if there's anything extra on your body? Renbaqian retracted his hand. The Empress was slightly taken aback. It's a small thing that's as thin as a cow's hair. It has an extremely fast ejection speed. Usually, they parasitized on the surface of the strange fish. When the strange fish jumped out of the water, they would also follow and shoot toward the target. If one didn't know, it would be easy to fall for it. These things will become bigger after sucking the blood of living creatures. At the same time, they can inject a small amount of poison to cause hallucinations. Then, they will fall into the river and be eaten by those strange fishes. Moreover, they can even bite a hole in ironware. Although His Majesty's body is tough, we still have to guard against it. Upon hearing Renbaqian's words, the Empress's expression changed slightly. As long as one was a woman, they would have an instinctive disgust towards insects, especially these creatures that crawled on their bodies and sucked their blood. The Empress squinted her eyes and sensed carefully. Following which, her facial expression turned ugly. He actually had it on him. This made the Empress feel disgusted as if she had eaten a fly. This thing could actually penetrate the force of her palm and land on her body. Furthermore, it could even hide from her. If it wasn't for Renbachian's reminder, she probably wouldn't have been able to discover those subtle incongruities. In the next second, the force exploded from the surface of the Empress's body. The Empress controlled the force on the surface of her body, and ordinary creatures would be shocked to death. However, the creatures that the Empress sensed still hadn't disappeared. The Empress's face turned green, and her body emitted a crackling sound. This wasn't the sound of her bones, but the sound of the air on the surface of her body. A strong wind swept around the Empress, and the lawn under her feet was instantly turned into debris. Subsequently, it was ground into extremely fine dust by the wind. However, the incongruities on the surface of the Empress's body didn't move at all. This time, the Empress started to feel a little scared. "Your Majesty, although these things are extremely weak and can be crushed to death with one finger, they aren't afraid of force," Renbachian said at this moment. The Empress glared at him. Renbachian spread his hands and expressed his helplessness. In fact, he had been watching the show from the side for a long time. However, these things weren't very dangerous. If it was just one person, it would be somewhat dangerous as they would easily fall into the water after experiencing hallucinations. However, if it was two people, as long as one of them was awake, there wouldn't be any danger. Furthermore, after sucking blood, these things could at most grow to the size of a pinky finger and would automatically fall off. The Empress grabbed Renbachian and ran into the distance, leaving behind only a sentence: "Everyone, wait here. If anyone dares to follow us, kill without mercy." In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Empress had run more than 15 kilometers with Renbachian before finding a forest to stop. The Empress turned her body, and her red muslin and white undergarments fluttered in the air. "Capture them for me." The Empress had goosebumps all over her body. After having so many bugs on her body for so long, no one could accept it. Renbachian saw the Empress's body in front of him. From head to toe, she was perfect and full of temptation. He subconsciously felt a wave of fire rising in him. He suppressed the fire in his heart and carefully looked at the places that the Empress had pointed at. There were only a few thin lines that were as thick as a cow's hair, which meant that these things hadn't broken through the surface of the Empress's skin. One had to know that these things could even drill through iron. Renbachian stretched out his hand and crushed the thin lines. With a flick, they fell off. The heads of these things were relatively hard and weren't afraid of qigong, but their bodies were extremely fragile. A total of 7 bugs were taken off by Renbachian, and the Empress heaved a sigh of relief. She was then hugged by Renbachian and said, "It seems that there are still some that I haven't found. I have to look carefully. Pft, has your waist recovered?" The Empress's voice was full of provocation. "This is a rare opportunity." Renbachian laughed. They were usually in the palace, but this feeling was completely different. This was a rare opportunity. They're still waiting. Let them continue to wait. Not long after, the two of them rolled on the ground. Whether it was rocks or trees, as long as they were hit, they would be smashed into pieces. The ground was left with large traces of being run over by a road roller. Half a day later, Tong Zhenye stood there and looked in the direction that the Empress had disappeared. His face gradually began to turn black. They hadn't returned after so long. After another half a day, Tong Zhenye finally knew that they wouldn't be able to wait for them today. According to past practice, they probably wouldn't be able to wait for them tomorrow or the day after. Should he go back or not? "What should we do, Minister?" An official from the Ministry of Works came up and asked. "Wait. Tong Jinya added, "Wait here. I'll go back to the city to settle some things and come back after that." Renbachien and the Empress were in this desolate wilderness with their limbs tightly intertwined, enjoying the pleasure of their divine senses and physical bodies fusing. 1.5 days later, the environment around them suddenly changed. The Empress was aware of the change in the environment and felt relieved when she realized that there was no one around. 2.5 days later, the two of them finally let go of each other. The Empress's body was covered in a rosy glow, and she was dazzling. "Where is this?" the Empress asked. "The headquarters of Wuji City." Renbachien put one hand on his waist and the other on the wall as he looked up at the big hole above him. The two of them had directly broken through more than 10 floors. The quality of the construction is too poor. Renbachien felt that he had to look for trouble. Due to the strength of the martial artists, Renbachien specially made all the walls and floors thicker, making them almost 2.5 times thicker than normal. Which construction company was responsible for this? With this quality. Chapter 877. In fact, the commotion caused by Renbachien and the Empress had already been noticed. This building, which was named Guchuan, had already been put into use. Of course, the area below was mainly used, but the area above was also cleaned every day. Moreover, the sound of them crashing through the floors could be heard from below. However, they were stopped before they could go upstairs. Ning Kaichin. After more than half a year of surgeries, Ning Kaichin finally got what she wanted and went directly to Wuji City. During the 6 months in Thailand, she had learned a lot of things, including how to use a mobile phone, how to use a computer, pinyin, simplified Chinese, and fluent Thai. She had even reached the level of CT 6 in English. It had to be said that there were always geniuses in this world, such as the Empress and Ning Kaichin. Ning Kaichin was a sword slave and couldn't cultivate. However, she had a learning ability that far exceeded ordinary people. After arriving in Wuji City, she strolled around for a few days to understand the situation there. After that, she would hold a book and stare blankly at the martial arts center. When Renbachien and the Empress caused a floor to collapse, she was aware of it. However, after approaching the floor where they were staying, Green Bead immediately sensed the aura from upstairs. After feeling the entire building shake as if it was being driven by a pile driver, she immediately retreated and stopped the winged cavalry. "Do you want to go up and watch Xiao Prince Consort and Her Majesty consummate their marriage?" When Ning Kaichin said this with a smile, the winged cavalry immediately turned pale. Renbachien and the Empress changed their clothes before leading her to tour the top 2 floors. Obviously, the Empress was very satisfied with this new home. In particular, the huge supermarket was almost as big as a smaller shopping mall. Half of the space was filled with shelves of dazzling goods, while the other half was filled with all kinds of underwear and clothes. There was also a small candy house. "All the clothes here are suitable for your Majesty's figure." Renbachien stood in the supermarket and turned around with an expression that said, "Am I handsome? Quick, praise me." Such an expression. The Empress's mouth twitched a little. She didn't feel that this scene was exaggerated. From her point of view, everything was meant to serve her. She felt that the underwear in front of her. The Empress picked up an inner treasury that looked like 2 ropes and asked, "Did you prepare this for me?" "Actually, there are better ones." Renbachien took out sets of sexy lingerie from the rack. "Transparent ones, fishnet ones, slit ones, duda ones. You want me to wear this?" The Empress hooked the 2 ropes with one finger and smiled faintly. Life is always full of surprises. Renbachien put on a serious expression. Otherwise, it would be too boring. "Are you saying that I'm boring you?" The Empress raised her head, pointed her nostrils at him, and had a dangerous look in her eyes. Ahem, Your Majesty, let's not overinterpret it. We have an ancient person who once wrote in a book, there are 2 trees in front of my house. One of them is a date tree, and the other is also a date tree. Then, it was interpreted by others to mean a lot of things. Maybe he was just trying to reduce the number of words, right? Look, there are a few more words in one go. Isn't that right? Just like what I said just now, although His Majesty is perfect enough, our married life can be a little more surprising, a little more passionate. Then wear it for me. The Empress's eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. I'll wear it then. Your Majesty, don't be touchy. Let me tell you, my waist can't take it anymore. Renbochin didn't even give her any discount. He quickly stripped himself clean and wrapped the 2 ropes around his legs. They broke. Renbochin swung his waist proudly. Too small. The Empress looked at Renbochin shamelessly swinging his waist and felt suffocated. This guy was getting more and more shameless. She rolled her eyes and suddenly said, I'm hungry. I heard that there's a kind of poached chicken. Give me 20 of them. Renbochin's face froze, and he looked down. Your Majesty, this is a personal attack. The Empress snorted and looked like she wanted to laugh. The 2 of them bickered for a long time before Renbochin put on his clothes and prepared to go down to find something to eat. Although the mansion on the top floor was equipped with a kitchen, there weren't even any servants. Renbochin felt that his waist couldn't support him making another lunch. In the past, he had always heard people say that they fought for 300 rounds. Renbochin estimated that those 300 rounds wouldn't even take 4 days. He was much more awesome than them. When he went downstairs, he saw Ning Kaichin and a group of winged cavalry warriors guarding the elevator. Everyone bowed their heads in greeting. All of you can leave. Ask the chef to prepare something in large quantities. First, bring a few cows and a few sheep. Be quick. Renbochin instructed. Ning Kaichin, stay behind. Hey, the curator is here. Is that Master's wife? She's much prettier than a celebrity. By the way, have you seen the curator fight? Whispers came from afar. Some people were curious about Renbochin's strength. After all, they could vaguely feel his aura, which was similar to that of those coaches. However, no one knew exactly how strong he was. After all, the coaches often demonstrated to them and didn't see the curator much, let alone see him fight. He's definitely stronger than the coaches in the gym. Otherwise, how can he intimidate them? Isn't that obvious? The coaches in our gym are all Earth-class experts. I heard that there aren't any Earth-class experts in the army. If the boss is stronger than the coaches, wouldn't he be the best in the world? Do you know Ping Kaihui? He's one of the top core disciples, but he can't even touch the corner of the boss's clothes. However, the boss only showed his strength once, and I didn't get to see him again. I knew that the curator was an expert the moment I saw him. Look at his forehead and the brightness. I don't know what kind of strange martial arts he practiced. Is that Master's wife? That temperament isn't that of an ordinary person. Why do I feel that Master's wife is stronger than the curator? You can't tell. Although Master's wife is beautiful, she's definitely stronger than the curator, someone retorted. Renbochin glanced over and saw more than a dozen disciples forming a small circle and whispering. If this group of people continued to gossip, he wouldn't be able to take it anymore. Renbochin suddenly looked fierce. Cough, cough. Do all of you have nothing to do? This group of people wasn't young, and they were all above the middle level of the man-will level. They were considered top experts on Earth, but they were still so gossipy. They didn't have the bearing of an expert at all. Chapter 878. How do you feel? Renbochin asked as he and Ning Kaichen found a corner to sit down. I've never felt so good. Ning Kaichen's eyes shone brightly as she spoke. Coupled with her charming face, Renbochin felt that there weren't many people in this world who could resist her charm. Sometimes, it was really strange. When Ning Kaichen was originally a man, she was delicate and pretty. However, after dressing up as a woman, she immediately underwent earth-shattering changes. Every frown and smile was captivating, making it impossible to associate her with her previous self. If the Ning family saw her now, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize her as their family's sword master even if they were beaten to death. In this situation, Renbochin could only say that she was originally suitable to be a woman. How do you feel about this world? It's very interesting. I like it here very much. As Your Highness said, most people in this world have knowledge equivalent to that of a scholar, which is simply shocking. Furthermore, cell phones and computers allow everyone to understand the happenings in every corner of the world. Everyone's knowledge is boundless, and they are much more knowledgeable than the ordinary officials of Great Xia. Ning Kaichen paused for a while as if she had more to say. Renbochin waited with great interest for her to continue. Ning Kaichen sorted out her thoughts and said, however, those who can become more than 10,000 people in the Yun Nation and Great Xia are outstanding. If they were placed in this world, they wouldn't be lost in the crowd. It can only be said that the people in this world are simply too blessed by nature, which makes people jealous. No matter how poor they are, they can at least fill their stomachs. As long as they have the heart, they at least have the opportunity to learn knowledge. This alone is something that Great Xia can't achieve. Naturally, only after the productivity is liberated and resources are abundant will people have the energy to do other things. Renbochin smiled faintly. This was what he had always wanted to do, to free the people of Dao from the endless struggle for survival. As for Ning Kaichen's views on the Great Xia officials, Renbochin agreed with her. Capable people wouldn't be lost in the crowd. Have you used your mobile phone? Renbochin asked. Yes, it's very convenient and interesting. I also have a multi-tone account. I thought it was fun at the time, so I casually used it. Now, I have about 18 million fans. Ning Kaichen pursed her lips and smiled. Renbochin was confused. What? Duo-in. Renbochin naturally knew about it. It was a short video social media app from more than 10 years ago. Although homogenization was serious and there was a decline 2 years ago, the number of users was still not small. However, after the entire nation started cultivating, this video platform became popular again. After all, there were many people who wanted to show off. Ordinary people could also see the performance of other martial artists from the videos and learn some cultivation methods. However, what had Ning Kaichen been doing for the past 6 months? He underwent surgery, recuperated, learned how to use a mobile phone, and even created a WeChat account to become an internet celebrity with 18 million followers. Did you perform a flying sword performance? This thought subconsciously emerged in his mind. Of course not. There are no sword slaves in this world. I've read about sword immortals in Xinxia novels and movies, and they're quite similar to us. However, they are much more carefree than us. Ning Kaichen pursed her lips and smiled. I performed a sword dance and taught them how to put on makeup, as well as how to make a woman more attractive. Other than giving a thumbs up, Renbochin didn't know what else to say. Keep a low profile. After all, you still have a mission in the future. Becoming an internet celebrity won't be very beneficial to your mission in the future, Renbochin said. I like it very much. So many people are paying attention to me and praising me. It's simply wonderful. Ning Kaichen's eyes lit up. Your Highness, you don't have to worry. I can make them unable to recognize me. Makeup can turn me into anyone. Your Highness, do you want to see the so-called celebrities of this world making love to you? Bang! Renbochin only saw a flash, and Ning Kaichen was gone. There was a hole in the ground where Ning Kaichen had been, and the Empress was looking at him with a faint smile on her face with her hands behind her back. Renbochin felt that the Empress liked to make this expression more and more. The meaning of this expression could be understood as, how do you want to die? She's a man. Renbochin's expression didn't change. Your Majesty, are you jealous of men? I'm jealous. Hee hee. The Empress's expression became more and more unfriendly. I'll take it that you're not, Your Majesty. In my heart, she's a man. She might even be older than me. Renbochin changed his tone very quickly. Pfft. The Empress spat at him and strolled to the window to watch the wind. After thinking for a while, she turned around and said to Renbochin, the new palace must be taller and have a better view. There was something that Renbochin wanted to say, it will collapse very quickly, especially with Your Majesty's tormenting. I reckon that the day the palace is completed will be the day of demolition. Looking down at the big hole in the ground, he could clearly see the steel bars that were as thick as an index finger. Renbochin began to worry that Ning Kaichen wouldn't be killed by the Empress, right? Ning Kaichen wasn't Tongjin. Even a winged cavalry warrior from Kismet Heaven couldn't withstand such a blow from the Empress. Moreover, all of her strength came from the spirit swords. Fortunately, there was a sound coming from below. Ning Kaichen pulled away the concrete blocks on her body and climbed up the stairs with a face full of dirt. Renbochin was relieved. This wasn't the first time that Ning Kaichen had been beaten like this. Why didn't she remember it? When Ning Kaichen came up, tears were rolling down her cheeks. It was truly a pitiful sight. It's bleeding, my face. Renbochin took a closer look and saw that there were a few cuts on her face. Other than that, there weren't any fractures. It seemed that the Empress had been merciful. It looked fierce, but in fact, the Empress's strength passed through Ning Kaichen and hit the ground directly. Ning Kaichen only had a few more cuts on her face. The Empress must have done it on purpose. Renbochin felt that, if the Empress didn't change her habit of demolishing things at will, it would be useless to build a new building. Looking at Ning Kaichen carefully examining her face in the mirror, Renbochin sighed and said, "Don't look anymore. Your face can still be saved. I still have a box of black mud cream here." "Oh, that's fine." Ning Kaichen was just weeping, but in the blink of an eye, she looked calm. Renbochin really wanted to give her 2 words, hee hee. He then asked Ning Kaichen what else she had learned these days to understand her situation so that he could decide if he should find her a tutor or something. Then, Renbochin's expression was like this. Why had she finished learning simplified Chinese and Pinyin? Could she operate a computer? Fluent in Thai? Could she pass CT 6 in English? Was she learning Japanese in C? Renbochin suddenly felt that he didn't need to kidnap any expert or scholar. He could just keep her here for 8 to 10 years before bringing her back. Compared to her, he had lived for more than 30 years. In fact, he had lived quite well. Why did he have to compare himself with others? What was there to compare? Am I such a person with such a strong desire to compare? Continue to learn what you are interested in. In addition, I will get someone to collect information on some people. Your task in the future is to capture these people and bring them here. You have to avoid everyone's attention. In terms of investigation and anti-investigation, it is best for you to learn more about it. Renbochin smiled kindly and suddenly felt a little dispirited. He didn't want to talk to her anymore. Chapter 879. After staying in Wuji City for a few days, Renbochin and the Empress went out to see what this burgeoning city looked like. It had to be said that this city was different from all the other cities in the country. It was rare to see single flying motorcycles in other cities. After all, air traffic control wasn't a joke. However, there were people from the Armed Forces Command patrolling the sky on flying motorcycles every day. One could be seen basically every 3 to 5 minutes. After all, there were too many experts in Wuji City, and the supervision had to be stricter. Furthermore, the nation had the idea of using this place as an experimental site. Since ancient times, there hadn't been any references for national martial arts practice, and the nation had to explore it bit by bit. The flying motorcycles were a small matter. What really surprised Rinpoche was that in other places, people took public transportation from the car, but many of them took public transportation from the roof. It was common to see a bus passing by, and then there would be people running behind it, jumping onto the roof of the bus in 2 steps and directly hitching a ride. There were 7 people sitting on the roof of a bus. For a moment, Rinpoche wondered if he had come to a country with cheats. In addition, it could be seen that Wuji City was different from other places. For example, had anyone seen the 36 5 elements continuous saber technique used to cut noodles? Had anyone seen someone use the steel breaking hand to mix noodles? Had anyone seen someone use their fingers to pick up fried glutinous rice balls from a frying pan? Had anyone seen someone use the Tai Fantasy sword to pierce through mutton skewers with 2 iron skewers? Had anyone seen a street sweeper use the chaotic wind staff technique? These past few days had been an eye-opener for Rinpoche. Here, martial arts practice was closely related to everyone. Even the ordinary people who were selected had a good foundation and talent. The owners of the small shops on the street might even be a manual expert. In other places, when regular customers and shop owners met, they would greet each other with, "The weather is good today. How's the business? It's all right. What do you want? Give me a bowl of knife-cut noodles without chopped green onions." Here, the 2 of them would greet each other. "Hey, boss, your 5 elements continuous saber technique is really good. Who did you learn from?" "Ha, I won't talk about my master. I don't have the face to mention it if I'm not good at martial arts. What do you want today? Come, let's try first." "No, what if you lose and leave? Wouldn't I be making a loss then? If I lose, I'll go bankrupt today just to buy 10 bowls of seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles. If I win, you'll treat me to 10 bowls. All right." The style was completely different. However, Rinpoche found it rather interesting. He pulled the Empress forward and said, "Boss, let's practice with you. If we win, you'll treat us to that seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles until we're full." The boss looked him up and down. "Bah, you're an Earth Realm expert. How dare you bully an old man like me?" Rinpoche was a little surprised. This old man had good eyesight. "Give me 2 bowls of seafood knife-cut noodles. 8,800 per bowl. That's 17,600 for both of you. This is a small business and we don't take credit." The boss's spirit was instantly lifted. Rinpoche's face darkened. "You know that it's an Earth rank expert, yet you still dare to kill it so ruthlessly. The last one is still buried in the ground." "Of course not. What a joke. If I sell it to others for 8,800 per bowl, I'll give you a 50% discount." The old man took out a menu and placed it in front of Rinpoche. On the menu, it really wrote, "Seafood nouveau riche knife-cut noodles, 8,800 per bowl." Rinpoche originally thought that the other party was trying to kill him, but it turned out that the price was clearly stated. Rinpoche really couldn't say anything. To him, money was just a number. He wanted to try out the taste of a bowl of noodles that cost 8,800. When the noodles were served, Rinpoche glanced at them. There was only an oyster in the noodles and nothing else. The taste was quite fragrant. It was filled with a fresh aroma. Renbochin even felt that he could smell the smell of the sea. This aroma gave Renbochin some confidence. When the first mouthful of noodles entered his mouth, the freshness, fragrance, tenderness, and smoothness exploded in his mouth in an instant. Renbochin's eyes widened. He didn't expect to meet an expert. It wasn't that Renbochin hadn't eaten good food before. Even though the standard of cuisine in that world was poor, the ingredients were delicious. With some seasonings, it was considered a delicacy on Earth. However, this person in front of him was different. He used ingredients from Earth to create a taste that far exceeded that of that world. He was definitely an expert. While Renbochin was in a daze, the Empress had already poured the noodles into her mouth. "Boss, give me another 50 bowls." Subsequently, the two of them swept away all 50 bowls. The Empress touched her belly and was a little hesitant. She estimated that she could still eat another 100 bowls. However, it was fast to eat, but slow to cook. If she continued to eat, she wouldn't be able to leave today. "Thank you for your patronage. 456,000. The old man came over with a smile to settle the bill. "Boss, I'm lacking a chef. Are you interested?" Renbochin grinned as he settled the bill. He had the intention of abducting this old man, but he still had to pay. "Your surname is Ren?" the old man asked with a smile. "You're really well informed. There's only so many people in this circle. If I didn't know anything, I wouldn't have lived to this day. It's not impossible for me to be your chef. What's your price?" You can read all the man-will techniques and some earth-will techniques in the martial arts center. Although the chances of you reaching the earth-will level at your age aren't high, it's not impossible. If the disciples in the martial arts center want to read these techniques, they have to accumulate merit points to exchange for them. It's not a loss for you to be my chef, but you can't leak any information. The old man's eyes lit up, and he laughed. "It's indeed not a loss. It's a pity that I'm old, and my thoughts have faded. I'll have to disappoint you." However, this old man could recommend someone whose culinary skills were no worse than this old man's. "If you think it's okay, I'll ask him to look for you." Renbochin couldn't help but laugh. This old man was quite astute. How pitiful all parents are. One chef isn't enough. If there's anyone with similar skills, ask them to look for me together. If you're willing to come, you can come along. Then you're my boss. How should I address you? My surname is Sun Zhongliang. Renbochin was in a good mood after leaving. He didn't expect to meet a chef when he came out for a stroll. He didn't have to pay much and merely let Sun Zhongliang take a look at the techniques. For others, this was a great benefit. For him, the techniques that he brought back from Tianjing Basin were almost moldy, and another batch was shipped back from the Yun Nation. The next day, Sun Zhongliang came over. Not only him, but his son and grandson also came. The whole family of 3 was here. Renbochin thought about it and simply asked Sun Zhongliang to bring his family over and let them live in the building. This way, he and the Empress could come back any time they wanted to eat. The building had more than 30 floors, and the bottom 2 floors were dedicated to guest rooms. There was plenty of space. For the next 2 days, the Empress thought of something while watching TV. She suddenly went downstairs to grab Ning Kaichin, stuffed her into the room, and stripped her clean. "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Renbochin looked into the room and was a little confused. He didn't know what the Empress was doing at all. "Get out. If you dare to peek, I'll gouge out your eyeballs." After a while, the Empress came out of the room contentedly. She looked at Renbochin, who had a strange look on his face, and calmly said, "I just want to see the difference between an acquired and an inborn woman." "What's the difference?" Renbochin was a little curious after hearing the Empress mention it. "You want to know?" "I'm really a little curious." Do you want to see? Renbochin wisely chose to give up his curiosity when he saw the Empress's increasingly dangerous gaze. It's meaningless to think about it. Forget it, I won't look. The Empress would always be the Empress. Even if she became his wife, she would still be the Empress, and he couldn't afford to provoke her. After staying for 7 days, Renbochin and the Empress returned to Deo. They first went to the plain that they had been to a few days ago, and they didn't expect to see the people from the Ministry of Works there. Even Tong Jinye was there. He had his hands on his hips, licked the toothpaste in one hand, and fished with his little penis from time to time. When Renbochin and the Empress returned, there was a snake-like fish with fangs hanging on Tong Jinye's little penis. Upon seeing the two of them, he quickly pulled the fish down, pulled up his pants, and greeted them indifferently. Renbochin was shocked on the spot. Old man, you are really a talent. Chapter 880. Renbochin had always known that Tong Jinye wasn't a good person, but he didn't expect him to be like this. This was beyond his imagination. Renbochin was dumbfounded. Oh, the Empress was almost the same. Sigma, after all, Tong Jinye had done such a big thing, so it was normal for him to feel awkward for a moment. However, Tong Jinye looked calm and collected. Sir Tong, what are you doing? Renbochin hesitated and asked cautiously. It tastes good. Tong Jinye waved the toothpaste in his hand. It can even produce foam. I have a box of it in my residence. I'm not talking about this. Sir Tong, what were you doing just now? Renbochin gestured. I went to relieve myself in the morning, but a blind dog bit me. Tong Jinye had a wretched look on his face. Renbochin heaved a sigh of relief. However, he thought about it again and realized that it wasn't right. Tong Jinye said it was in the morning, but the sun was already high above their heads. The people in this world did not have the habit of sleeping in the wee hours of the morning and waking up at noon. If they said it was morning, then it was really morning. They usually woke up at around 4 o'clock, cleaned up and had something to eat. At around 6 o'clock, they had to go to the palace and attend court at 7 o'clock. Sir Tong, it's noon now. Renbochin pointed to the top of his head. I want to see if its teeth are harder or my spear is sharper. Tong Jinye's face was full of pride. At this moment, Renbochin finally knew from whom Tong Lan learned how to raise her small face and put on an arrogant expression. Then, it was the whole morning. Tong Jinye waved at Renbochin, grabbed him by the neck, and walked out while whispering, Hey, Xiao Prince Consort, let me tell you. This thing looks scary and has a mouth full of fangs, but it doesn't have any in its throat. Instead, it keeps sucking. I reckon that this thing is used to swallowing things in its stomach. It looks scary and quite comfortable. Renbochin _ winky face this time, even God won't be able to save you. Are you whispering to me with that voice of yours? Why do I hear that you are showing off? The clouds behind the Empress had turned into a typhoon. Renbochin could clearly feel that the surrounding air pressure had dropped. He hurriedly jumped 10 meters away to keep a distance from Tong Jinye. Unexpectedly, the Empress didn't flare up. Before the storm swept out, she withdrew it. Ignoring Tong Jinye, she said faintly, I want a fish. I'll get a fishing rod for Her Majesty. Renbochin had a bad feeling about this. No need. The Empress smiled at Tong Jinye and said, Minister of Works, I want a fish. I'll have to trouble you to be the bait. Ha. Tong Jinye's tone sounded like an exclamation mark. In the next second, the Empress kicked Tong Jinye to the ground. Then, she lifted his calf and threw his upper body into the river. Seeing that he was trying to move, she kicked him. Tong Jinye immediately lost all his strength. Other than the calf that the Empress was holding onto, his entire body was submerged in the water. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Empress threw Tong Jinye out of the river. He was 400 kilograms when he went into the water, and when he came back up, he became 300 kilograms. His body was covered with those strange, black, snake-like fish. After fishing for an afternoon, they caught more than 2,000 kilograms of strange fish. One of them was 6 to 7 meters long and was thicker than a bucket. It could swallow Tong Jinye directly. If it really swallowed him, the consequences would be obvious. That night, Renbachien and the others ate that strange fish. Even though this strange fish didn't look very good, its flesh was extremely tender and had very few bones. It was very praiseworthy. In particular, Renbachien discovered that the worms on the strange fish could add a lot of flavor to the soup, and their effects were similar to chicken essence. This was because Renbachien cleaned the fish that he and the Empress caught. After cooking it, he found that Tong Jinye's fish was much more delicious. He could smell that it was different from his own fish from afar. At first, he thought that it was because the fish was too big, which made the taste worse. After trying it out, he realized that the problem was actually with the worms on the strange fish. At first, Renbachien was prepared to kill as many strange fish as possible in the river, but he changed his mind at this time. This fish tasted good, contained a lot of energy, and had very few bones. The Aboriginals who didn't like to eat fish should be able to accept it. Besides, weren't those little worms the best chicken essence? These two kinds of creatures had a lot of value in breeding. Naturally, Renbachien wasn't thinking about how to make money. Instead, he was thinking about how to rely on these things to drive a batch of industries and support a lot of people. Although he had a lot of things that could drive a batch of industries, these were more suitable for the Aboriginals. Renbachien had always intended to lure the Aboriginals out of the 60,000 mountains. However, the Aboriginals were different from the ordinary people who had lived on the plains for decades. They were more ferocious, and they were naturally very good at fighting, hunting, and even killing. If they weren't too scattered, they could be directly used as elite soldiers. However, they were much worse in other aspects, especially in terms of their ferocious temperaments. The people of Lawn City were also ferocious, but the Aboriginals were used to using swords, which could easily cause trouble. If Renbachien wanted to use these Aboriginals, he had to first let them get used to life on the plains, which was completely different from fighting and killing in the mountains. On the other hand, farming was not a bad idea. This river could feed tens of thousands of people without a problem. Renbachien took note of this matter and walked around this remote area with the Empress for a few days. He also asked the people from the Ministry of Works to measure the land on the plains between the two rivers before returning. Just as Renbachien returned to the palace, a convoy arrived in Lawn City. It was a majestic convoy of hundreds of ox carts. The ruts on each cart were deep, and one could tell at a glance that the carts were filled with goods. Military Advisor Qing, is this Lawn City? Are we going to this godforsaken place to get food? The curtain of a carriage was lifted, and a man with a full beard poked his head in. Qing Lian was holding a book in one hand and drawing something on a wooden board with the other. When she heard Renbachien's question, she didn't even raise her head and said, "This is Deo. Spirit will experts are everywhere, and earth will experts are like dogs. Perhaps the person who passed by you is an earth will expert. If they hear what you said, don't expect me to save you. You aren't the only envoy who has died in Lawn City over the years. Is it that exaggerated?" The burly man coughed dryly. He knew that there were many Aboriginal experts. The Aboriginal commoners he met along the way were all at the man-will level, which was indeed terrifying. However, based on what he had seen and heard along the way, there weren't many earth-will experts either. Of course, the number of earth-will experts was much higher than that of Great Xia. However, according to Qing Lian, it was too exaggerated. Do you think this is great, Xiao? Here, without the strength of a spirit will expert, one can't even enter the imperial court. Qing Lian pouted. The reason why you saw so few earth will experts along the way is that most of them have joined the militia and are now busy plundering in the Yun nation and guarding the captives. But where is this? This is the capital of Dayo. Let me remind you, look more and talk less. It doesn't matter if you die, but if there is any delay, I will let Kong Mingzi summon your soul back and torture it for 100 years. Upon hearing the words, Kong Mingzi, the burly man's expression changed slightly. He put down the curtain, turned his head, and muttered a few words. Idiot! Qing Lian moved her lips in the carriage. She wasn't afraid that he would hear her from outside. This General Huaiji was really an idiot. Chapter 881. It was the second day since Renbachin met Qing Lian. In fact, Renbachin already knew that this group had passed through Ping City 13 days ago. He only found out last night that Qing Lian was with them. Early the next morning, Renbachin saw a graceful lady waiting in front of the academy. He had arranged to meet Qing Lian in the afternoon, but when he saw her now, he understood that she was here to familiarize herself with him. After all, she was his student, so he didn't say much and let her in. They sat down, and Renbachin looked at Qing Lian. After more than a year in the volunteer army, she hadn't changed much. Her skin hadn't darkened, and she hadn't become more resolute. She seemed to be the same gentle lady from back then. Principal. I'm here to return the books. Qing Lian had a wide forehead and a big mouth, but these weren't flaws on her face. She was very beautiful when she smiled. The most important thing was that she had a scholarly temperament, which was rare in this world. Renbachin brought a few books over. 3 of them were about mathematics, and the other 2 were about probability. One of them even touched on calculus. For this world, this was rather advanced knowledge. Alright, on Earth, this was considered a rather complicated knowledge. Who knew how many people would wish they were dead? In any case, Renbachin knew that it would be as difficult as defeating the Empress if he wanted to pass. Do you understand? Renbachin had a kind smile on his face, but his heart was full of malice. He wanted to let the natives of this world experience the power of calculus. He originally wanted to lock his students in the classroom in a few years and let them pull their hair out in front of calculus. He didn't expect someone to see it in advance. I understand most of it, but there's one thing I don't quite understand. I was just about to ask you. There's still something I don't understand about the fixed point theorem. Qing Lian took out a wooden board and used a hairpin to engrave numbers on it. Here, let F be a continuous mapping from a sphere to itself. There must be a point C such that F, C, equals C. Or, C. That is, F either has a fixed point or a point that maps to its opposite point. The smile on Renbachin's face immediately froze. The terrifying memory of being dominated by calculus resurfaced in his mind. He felt a toothache and the urge to pull his hair out. Oh, he had no hair now. Stop. Renbachin quickly stopped her and asked with a strange expression, Are you here to test me today? How could I? I'm also a student of Principal Zhang, and I'm here today to ask for advice. I don't think anyone in this world can answer my question except for you. Qing Lian blinked her eyes and said. She thought about the reason why Renbachin had rejected her. The probability of the reason being true was 30%, the probability of not being able to answer was 50%, and the other possibilities were 20%. In other words, there was a 50% probability that Renbachin could answer her question. The probability of him meeting someone who could answer this question within 3 years was 1 in a million. In 10 years, the probability was 1 in 10,000. In 20 years, the probability was 1 in 100. This probability would increase with time. In other words, there was a high probability that he would meet someone who could answer his questions after 20 years. That was too long. He still had to rely on Zhao Prince Consort. Ren Baqin inexplicably got goosebumps all over his body. He suddenly felt that Qing Lian's calm and serene expression was probably a demon, right? Ren Baqin would never touch calculus again. However, he couldn't admit defeat at this time. The batch of students that you know will graduate in 2 months. After graduation, some of them will continue to learn more advanced knowledge. If you can give up everything and return to the academy, I will teach you about calculus. I borrowed your books because you are sincere about learning, but now, in what capacity are you asking me for advice? Ren Baqin felt that he had found a good excuse. After all, she wasn't a student of the academy anymore, but a military counselor of a great Xia volunteer army. You aren't my student now, so I naturally won't answer such a profound question. Well, this reason wasn't very good, but Ren Baqin couldn't think of a better one, so he didn't reveal his fear. Qing Lian was stunned and then pursed her lips into a smile. I was too presumptuous. Following which, he smiled extremely brilliantly and proposed a request that had a success rate of 87%. In order to better communicate with Deo, Duke Su wants to send an envoy to Lan City. I want to settle some matters and become the envoy. When the time comes, Principal Ren, please don't reject me from returning to the residence to study. Ren Baqin was surprised. Send an envoy. In what name? Su Gong was Su Qing, who established himself after the uprising. At this time, although the volunteer army had reached a scale of 1 million people, it was still a peasant army after all. It was normal to want some help from Deo, but sending an envoy to Deo was more interesting. In the name of King Ping. Qing Lian smiled. Upon hearing this, Ren Baqin tapped his fingers on the table as he pondered. Great Xia had almost exhausted its vitality in the previous 2 wars with Deo. In addition, corrupt officials imposed exorbitant taxes, and there were spies sent by Su Qing. People in many places had no way to make a living. Su Qing started with the slogan "Equal Rations." This slogan swept a large number of people who couldn't survive. In addition, Great Xia was short of soldiers at that time, so it became popular in a short period of time. Although Great Xia's elite soldiers were almost wiped out, there were still many valiant generals in the imperial court. After 1 or 2 years, they trained a group of soldiers who could fight. Although they lost half of their power, they gradually stabilized their position. At this time, both sides were in a state of tug-of-war, and it would be difficult to make a breakthrough in a short period of time. Under such circumstances, Su Qing wanted to proclaim himself king. Ren Baqin thought about it. In a situation where it was difficult to make progress in a short period of time, proclaiming himself king wasn't the best way, but it could also calm people down. It would be reasonable if he sent an envoy after proclaiming himself king. As for more details, I will tell you when I have an audience with Her Highness in the afternoon. Qing Lian bowed slightly. Ren Baqin nodded. In the afternoon, he would have an audience with Her Highness as an envoy, which would be a public affair. Now, he was indeed here as a private person. Unfortunately, why did he mention calculus? I want to borrow a few more books to read. You won't refuse me, right? Just now, you said that you saw my sincerity in learning. Qing Lian said as she tucked her hair behind her ear. Go. Ren Baqin waved his hand. Take your wooden board away. I'll leave it here. If I don't understand it when I come again, I will have to wait for you to answer my questions when I return to the academy. Qing Lian bowed again before retreating. Ren Baqin sat in the chair, looked at the symbols on the wooden board, and felt his brain and teeth begin to hurt. A long time after Qing Lian left, Ren Baqin carried the wooden board out, dug a hole, and buried it in it. Only then did he feel a little better. He sat back in his office and began to ponder. Although Qing Lian had learned mathematics before, it was at most at the junior high school level. When it came to Renbaqian, she had systematically learned modern geometry and algebra in elementary and junior high school. He didn't expect to learn calculus now. Without anyone to teach her, she had learned high school and university mathematics by herself, and had reached a very high level. This was another cheat. He had to admit that there were always some people in the world who were loved by heaven and earth. For example, the Empress was good at martial arts, Ning Kaichen was on earth, and this Qing Lian, huh? Renbaqian suddenly thought of something. Ning Kaichen and Qing Lian. Did he only know two sword masters? Both of them were so talented. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Did he meet even geniuses? Renbaqian suddenly remembered that 1,000 years ago, there was a magnificent period when thousands of sword masters were born and fought against each other, leaving behind quite a bit of fame. However, that period was too long ago, and the records were vague, so he didn't think too much about it. After that, sword masters were prohibited from entering the imperial court as officials. The reason was very simple. Sword masters needed a lot of resources to build the sword cleansing pool, so the possibility of corruption and bribery was too high. In addition, sword masters had to spend a lot of energy to buy rare treasures for the sake of their lifespan. They even spent a long time searching for them in barren mountains and forests. Naturally, they gradually became less eye-catching. However, at this time, Renbaqian suddenly realized a problem after having some doubts in his heart. How many of the spirit will experts from 1,000 years ago were recorded in the history books and spread throughout the world? Perhaps even the disciples of their own sects didn't know about them. 1,000 years and dozens of generations were really too long. Sword masters didn't have a long lifespan, and there were very few spirit will experts. The number of sword masters was definitely less than that of martial artists. Under such circumstances, being able to leave a heavy mark in history wasn't just because of strength, right? Could it be that the sword master's skills were wrong? Even though they couldn't practice martial arts, they were far more talented than ordinary people in other aspects. If that was the case, it would be a little scary. Chapter 882. That afternoon, Renbaqian met Qing Lian in the palace again. "Greetings, Your Highness." Qing Lian stepped forward and bowed. "Well, we're acquaintances. Tell me about your purpose." Renbaqian nodded and chuckled. "I heard that you brought hundreds of carriages into the city. Are you here to return the money?" "You're right, Your Highness. I'm here to return the money." "I've never forgotten the agreement between you and Su Gong," Qing Lian said. "However, in addition to returning the money, there's one more thing I need your help with. This is a piece of cake for you. Tell me about it." Renbaqian had some guesses after learning about Qing Lian's team last night. Although he didn't know much about Su Qing's situation in the north, he could more or less guess it. When Su Qing revolted, the people in many prefectures, Great Xia was divided into regions by prefectures, had no way to live. Su Qing swept away millions of refugees, and the two sides fought in full swing, affecting more than just millions of people. Large areas of the people were displaced, dragged into the chaos, or busy fleeing for their lives. The discipline of this peasant rebellion was completely imaginable. Wherever they went, they would be like locusts passing through. Who was going to farm under such circumstances? If no one was going to farm, they would definitely have to buy food. "Your Highness, in addition to returning part of the promised reward, we also want to buy some food," Qing Lian said respectfully. "Hee hee, hee 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 hee." Renbaqian laughed happily, and his unfathomable laughter echoed throughout the hall. "Coming to Deo to buy food. I can't believe you can think of this." Dayo had been short of food for 10,000 years, and the annual import of food also accounted for a large proportion. Of course, this was 2 years ago. Your Highness, let's not talk about the fact that the Yun nation is now occupied by Dayo. Dayo itself is no longer short of food and is even rich. If you can lend us a helping hand at this time, we will be very grateful. Besides, if we are defeated, there will be no benefit for you. If we continue to be in a stalemate with the great Xia court, that is what you want to see the most. Qing Lian straightened up and spoke slowly. Her voice was full of confidence in her own knowledge. She believed that what she said was what Rinpoche wanted. Great Xia. To be honest, I have no opinion on Great Xia after Xia Baichong died. By the way, do you think I care about Great Xia? Rinpoche laughed. I don't care who wins or loses, or if you each take a side. I believe your Highness's words. Controlling the Yun nation was akin to controlling the lifeline of Dayo. Whether it was salt, food, or weapons, they would no longer be able to restrict Dayo. Soldiers had always been Dayo's strong suit. Coupled with your Highness's wisdom, Dayo has no shortcomings. Perhaps they are only fighting for the right to rule that land for a few decades. She raised her head and stared at Rinpoche without blinking. I'm not interested in that piece of land. Rinpoche shook his head. This was the truth. He really wasn't interested in that piece of land. It was not easy to occupy, conquer, and rule a country. Whoever did it would know. If it weren't for his bald head, he felt that his hair would have turned white by now, and this was only the Yun nation. In fact, this area was enough for him to play around in. Dayo, together with the Yun nation, was equivalent to 3/5 of China. If it were on Earth, it would be considered a superpower. The endless treasures in the 60,000 mountains and the mineral resources of the Yun nation were all waiting for him to develop. There was no need to forcibly occupy another piece of land, bear the hostility of many people, and have a headache every day in order to eliminate the rebels and appease the people. In fact, Rinpoche wanted to see high-rise buildings, cars, trains, ships, and planes in Dayo. The stark contrast between the feudal society outside the border would be very interesting. Qing Lian could tell that Rinpoche's words were true, but she also understood that people would change. Even if the other party wasn't interested now, it didn't mean that he wouldn't be interested in the future. In any case, there is no harm in having a friendly regime with Dayo. It will also save you a lot of trouble in the future. Qing Lian had a smile on her face. Her prediction of the success rate of this trip was 90%. Therefore, no matter what Rinpoche said, she wouldn't be worried. However, Rinpoche didn't intend to keep her in suspense. He was going to agree to her request anyway. The yield of those high-yield crops was too high. The local crop yield of 300 to 400 caddies per mu had jumped to 3,000 to 7,000 caddies per mu, and there were even 2 crops a year. It was estimated that after the harvest in 2 months, the price of sweet potatoes would drop to 5 copper coins per kilogram. Recently, Rinpoche was preparing to promote cellars and saltpeter to make ice to store these crops. At the same time, he was sorting out the production process of sweet potato wine, sweet potato starch, and vermicelli. If he could sell a batch, it would relieve a lot of pressure. After the harvest in 2 months, it would be the rainy season, and he had half a year to slowly prepare. Let's get down to business. How much money did you bring and how many caddies of food do you want to buy? Rinpoche asked. Qing Lian wasn't surprised to hear this. Your Highness, we brought a total of 15 million taels of gold, silver, and jewelry. 10 million taels is 10% of the portion agreed upon by Su Gong and Sir. The remaining 5 million taels of gold and silver will be used to buy sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. Rinpoche calculated in his heart. According to the current market price, sweet potatoes were 3 copper coins per caddy, 30 copper coins per bucket, and 300 copper coins per stone. However, he definitely couldn't sell them at 3 copper coins per caddy. First of all, the market price would be affected. Moreover, many of them had to be transported from other places. Together with the transportation costs, he had to sell them at least at 6 copper coins per caddy. Furthermore, after they bought these high-yielding crops in bulk, they would be able to bear fruit in the region occupied by Su Qing in the second half of this year to next year. In any case, he brought them back from Earth. Did they pay any copyright fees? This was only for sweet potatoes. The price of potatoes and pumpkins was even higher. Renbochin silently calculated for a while before looking up and saying, "I can sell you 1 million caddies of sweet potatoes, 500,000 caddies of potatoes, 500,000 caddies of pumpkins, and 150,000 four-corned cows. In addition, I will send someone to Ping City to deliver them over 5 months. You will have to pay an extra 2 million taels." The price was equivalent to 7 times the current market price. However, the price couldn't be calculated according to the market price. 2 million caddies was equivalent to 100,000 tons. In this era, this was simply an insane amount of transportation. With the current muddy roads, an ox cart generally weighed about half a ton. Based on the calculation of a month's round trip, 5 round trips would require 40,000 ox carts and 20,000 escorts. During this period, the consumption of food would also be a significant figure. "Thank you very much, Your Highness." Qing Lian smiled and didn't have any intention of bargaining. In fact, it was already a success to be able to buy so much food here. As for the price, it was the least of their concerns. Most of the time, it wasn't that the more you bought, the cheaper it was, that the more you bought, the more expensive it was. Needless to say, other than Deo, they simply had no other place to buy food. Renbochin was already being kind by selling them at this price. He was also considerate enough to deliver the goods to Ping City. Of course, the harvest wasn't small either. 7 million taels was more than the annual income of Deo's national treasury. Furthermore, this was the first time such a large amount of money had flowed back to Deo apart from robbery. After settling the matter, Renbochin could finally ask the questions he wanted to ask. Chapter 883. You're done talking. Next, tell me something that interests me. Renbochin twisted his buttocks a few times on the couch. To be honest, it wasn't comfortable to sit on this thing at all. The back of the couch was very far away, and he couldn't lean on it at all. Next time, it would be better to find someone to make a chair and let people carry it wherever they go. Please speak, Your Highness. How many sword masters are there in the world now? The sword master usually did not fight with others, so it was almost impossible to tell. Moreover, they usually appeared in places where there were few people. Therefore, other than themselves, no one knew how many sword masters there were in the world. In fact, Renbochin suspected that they didn't even know. About 100 people. Qing Lian was a little uncertain. She then added, between 120 and 150 people. How do you know this number? How many have you seen? Renbochin immediately looked interested. In fact, there is an organization whose members are all sword slaves. Of course, there are also some ordinary people and cultivators who mainly serve sword slaves. This number was the number that the people in the organization had once said, that there were 110 members. In addition to those who have not been found and those who have just become sword masters, I believe that there are no more than 150 people and no less than 120 people. This was not easy to deduce. Sometimes, 10 sword masters would appear in a year, and sometimes, not even one would appear in several years. There was no pattern at all. Of course, it's also possible that the timeline we paid attention to was too short, so we didn't discover the pattern. If we stretch the timeline to a few thousand years or even longer, we might be able to find a pattern. As for those I've seen, there are only 8 of them, Qing Lian replied after thinking carefully. He immediately thought of the organization that Ning Kaichen had mentioned. What's that organization called? How do I contact him? What does this organization do? Did they look for you? How did they determine your identities? Ren Baqin pondered for a moment before throwing out a series of questions. This organization is called Shadow Dream. It said that every leader's spirit sword is Shadow Dream. In fact, Shadow Dream had existed for a long time. It was said that it had survived from the most glorious era of the sword slaves 1,000 years ago. The main thing is for the sword masters to exchange materials with each other. They will also release information about some missions. You can complete missions to obtain materials that you need or the detailed location of certain materials. Ning Kaichen said that this organization had just appeared, but Qing Lian said that it had existed for a long time, at least 1,000 years. The latter's words were more trustworthy. Ning Kaichen might have just come into contact with the organization, so her knowledge was limited. However, in order to attract people to join an organization, shouldn't they first introduce their organization's long history to increase their persuasiveness? This was a little strange. Could it be 2 different organizations? However, there were only over 100 sword masters in total, so how could there be 2 organizations? Also, it said that the method they used to determine the sword master is related to the Shadow Dream. Sword master, is there only one organization? Ren Baqin asked doubtfully. Since your highness is asking this, it seems that you have come into contact with other sword masters. Is it that Ning Kaichen? In the past, there had only been one organization. However, the members of the organization had different beliefs. Some of them held on to the idea that they had always been detached from the world, while others believed that sword slaves should be restored to their former glory. At the very least, they shouldn't have to live in the wilderness from birth to death. He should grasp more power and force others to search for resources for him. These 2 viewpoints had existed for a long time. 4 years ago, they finally split due to some matters. One of them is called Shadow Dream, and the other established an organization called Hidden Dream, Qing Lian introduced. Upon hearing this, Ren Baqin finally understood. Ning Kaichen was probably one of the few sword masters who hadn't been recruited before. He had only come into contact with Hidden Dream and not Shadow Dream. According to the timeline, he was found by Hidden Dream after he came to Deo. Are the people in Hidden Dream inclined to drift away from the world? How many people are there on both sides? Ren Baqin calculated in his mind and felt that the latter should be easier to deal with. The former could actually be contacted as well. This group of people was actually divided into 2 groups. One group had a desire for power that had already taken root in their hearts. These people were unstable factors. The other group wanted to drive ordinary people to help them search for materials. He could completely recruit these people. As long as they could meet his requirements, what harm was there in satisfying their wishes? Ren Baqin then learned from Qing Lian about some of the situations that she knew. Among them, Shadow Dream had the most people. There were about 80 of them, and only 7 or 8 of them were at the spirit will level. The rest were equivalent to the earth will level. Among these people, only a few had a desire for power. Even among the 7 or 8 spirit will sword masters, most of them only hoped to find materials more quickly by driving ordinary people. They were also greedy for the prosperity of the world. After all, sword masters were also human, and most people still liked the prosperous world. The loneliness of searching for materials in the wild for a long time was indeed unbearable. However, if they wanted to drive ordinary people or even martial artists, they had to have a certain amount of power. As for Hidden Dream, there were only about 20 people, and 5 or 6 of them were spirit will sword masters. What's their contact information? Is your highness very interested in them? In fact, they are just some pitiful people. Qing Lian's tone was slightly sarcastic when she said the latter half of the sentence. At the same time, she was also laughing at herself because she was the same kind of person as them. Indeed. I have a conjecture that I need them to help me verify. Are any of the sword masters that you have come into contact with particularly talented in this area? For example, you. So, your highness has taken a fancy to this ability. Qing Lian smiled slightly, and her face relaxed a little. After all, she was the same kind of person as them. So, how does your highness want to treat them? If it's as I think I can reach an agreement with them. They will work for me in exchange for the materials they want. They don't have to stay away from the prosperity of the world and roam the wilderness every day. I can also mobilize enough manpower to search for what they want. There are countless treasures in the 60,000 mountains, and no one except the aboriginals can get their hands on them. What does your highness want them to do? Qing Lian showed a look of interest when she heard this. Perhaps do some research and study the operation of heaven and earth, just like what you learned in school. Perhaps they will become teachers and be responsible for teaching students. The specifics will depend on how far they can go. This is also a good opportunity for them. Whether it is to search for materials in the wilderness or to carry out missions, they will inevitably encounter danger. As long as they use their spirit swords, they will lose their lifespan. However, they don't have to worry at all with me. Qing Lian became even more interested. Great Xia and the previous royal family were tempted by the strength of the sword masters, but they followed the rules and didn't dare to use them. Even if they kept 2 sword masters in private, it was also because of their fighting strength. This was because the sword masters usually looked like ordinary people and wouldn't be guarded against. If they were used for assassination, the success rate was extremely high. However, there was a problem. As long as the sword masters fought, they would lose their lifespan. Renbochin wasn't interested in the sword masters' fighting ability, but their talent in learning. This was very refreshing to her. If what Renbochin said was true, then it was indeed an opportunity for many sword masters. I hope that you can help me contact some sword masters. You can use your own resources to contact them or issue missions through those organizations. I want to test whether they are like what I think they are. Renbochin said. What can they get? The results of this test can be seen in a few months at the latest, and there are no risks. If they don't pass the test, I can send 10 winged cavalry warriors to accompany them into the 60,000 mountains to search for the materials they need. The time limit is 6 months. No matter how much they find, it will belong to them. If they pass the test, they will have to stay in Lon City. I can promise them to choose a rare material as a reward. As for the quantity, it will be increased or decreased according to the value of the material. I will satisfy them. I can go back and try to contact them. Is there a requirement for strength? No. Understood. I will inform Her Highness as soon as possible. If there is any problem, it is that Lon City is a little different from the prosperous world they imagined. Very soon, Lon City will be more prosperous than any city they have ever seen. Renbochin laughed. Chapter 884. Qing Lian stayed in Lon City for a week before leaving. She still had to help Renbochin contact a few sword masters. As for the others, they stayed in Lon City. After all, Qing Lian could leave the matter of purchasing so much food, but they couldn't. This was related to the lives of millions of people in the Revolutionary Army and the stability of the rear. As long as the food was transported back and planted, a large amount of food would calm the people and completely stabilize the Revolutionary Army in a year. Correspondingly, the people in the areas controlled by Great Xia were still in dire straits. It could be said that these high-yield food were the best trump card against Great Xia. Even if Great Xia could obtain these food and plant them on a large scale, it would take 2 to 3 years. A lot of things could happen during this time. Therefore, they had to pay attention to this food, which was even more important than their own lives. However, less than a week after Qing Lian left, half of the more than 700 revolutionary soldiers were seriously injured, and the other half were lightly injured. The surplus general who led the army had half of his bones broken. Ren Baqin scratched his head when he received the report. At first, only some of the Great Xia people were beaten up. In fact, they weren't the ones who caused trouble. After all, they weren't fools. After all, foreigners were still relatively rare in Lan City. Jing tribe. That was his younger brother who was protected by Zhao Prince Consort. People from the Yun nation. Now, it was also his younger brother who was protected by Zhao Prince Consort. When they heard that they were from Great Xia and that they had a war with Great Xia 2 years ago, some people immediately started to provoke and cause trouble. Then, there was a natural conflict, and dozens of Great Xia people were seriously injured. The Aboriginals were experienced in fighting all year round. They knew how to control their strength and didn't kill a single one of them. The most serious one only had about 30 broken bones. General YG was furious when he received the news. Where was the law? Although this was the territory of the Aboriginals, there was no need to bully them like this. He couldn't just be a coward, could he? Would he still be able to be a human when he went back? Then, he led his men away. At first, 7 or 8 people ganged up on 30 to 40 of them. When they arrived, it became 70 to 80 people ganging up on 600 to 700 of them. After reading the report, Ren Baqin felt that this group of people was too much. In particular, the people from the Public Order Bureau stood by and watched. Where was the law? Dayo was a society governed by law. Well, not yet. When Ren Baqin first arrived, the Aboriginal commoners often fought with the foreign merchants until their brains came out. The punishment was only 3 to 10 lashes of the whip, and they would be able to recover after lying in bed for 8 to 10 days. Ren Baqin rubbed his forehead and went to find the Empress. The Empress was recuperating her pregnancy. The method of recuperating her pregnancy was watching the computer, eating sweets, fruits, and alcohol. Ren Baqin still wanted to fight against the Empress's habit of letting go. However, after arguing for 4 days, Ren Baqin put his hands on his waist and gave in. If he continued to argue, he would die before he could fulfill his ambitions. He could only hope that the Empress was strong enough and that the son in her womb was strong enough. It could also be a daughter. In any case, whatever it was, even if it was a ball. Your Majesty. Ren Baqin slammed the report on the table. The Empress raised her head and looked at him. Then, she leaned back and placed her hand on her belly. With a lazy look on her face, she said, "There's another one in my tummy. I can't stand being bullied or frightened. Your Majesty, can't you learn something good? Don't always learn from those things in TV dramas. Besides, who would dare to bully you? You can fight 8 people with one hand." Ren Baqin felt that if there was anything worse than an indifferent empress, it would be an empress who had nothing better to do than learn from TV dramas. With your physique, you can probably fight 800 people. The Empress gestured with her hand. At least 800. Ren Baqin added. Aren't you busy right now? What's the matter this time? The Empress raised her eyebrows and looked at him. Your Majesty, take a look. Ren Baqin sighed. The Empress glanced at it and sat back. How do you think I should deal with this? A country has its laws. Ren Baqin stated the pros and cons in a deep voice. Your Majesty, things are different now. Not only are the people of Great Xia watching, but it doesn't matter what they think. The Jing tribe and the people of the Yun nation are watching to see how you will deal with this. The Aboriginal commoners and officials are also watching to see how you will deal with this. If you let them go this time, they will naturally be more daring in the future. Next time, they will still dare to do this. Not only to the people of Great Xia, but also to the Jing tribe and the people of the Yun nation. The Empress looked at Rinpoche with one finger under her chin and suddenly laughed. When you speak like this, you are actually quite pleasing to the eye. Alright, I understand and will give them an explanation. Those who beat people will receive 30 lashes each. The public order officers who were present at the scene at the time will receive 60 lashes each for incompetence. If there is a next time, they will be dismissed from the public order department. As for the people of Great Xia, I will arrange for the medical bureau to treat them. Rinpoche nodded. Such an outcome would be able to intimidate some people. The brains of the Aboriginals were full of muscles and couldn't remember many things for long. However, the public order department should be able to remember everything from top to bottom. Your Majesty, I'll take my leave first, Rinpoche said. I'm very bored. Keep me company, the Empress said lazily. Rinpoche calculated that he still had to go to the Ministry of Works in the afternoon and meet the new commander of the rearguard commandery. The balance in his heart began to sway. On one hand, he placed his work, and on the other hand, he placed the Empress. Was there a need to choose? I'm a person who works hard for the people. Rinpoche said righteously. Oh. I just realized that today. The Empress looked at him with a faint smile. Compared to the people, Your Majesty is obviously more important. Rinpoche's expression didn't change at all. Forget it, you can go. If you continue to say that, I will feel that I'm an incapable ruler. The Empress waved her hand in frustration. How can that be? Rinpoche sat beside the Empress and laughed. Half a day won't make a difference. Tell me. Are you considered a sycophant? The Empress found it a little funny. If Your Majesty is an incapable ruler, I will be a sycophant. If Your Majesty is a wise ruler, I will be a capable one. Rinpoche laughed. After sitting with the Empress for 2 hours, Rinpoche left in a hurry. He sent someone to inform Tong Jingye that he would go to the Ministry of Works tomorrow. He had to meet the new commander of the rearguard commandery. Over the past few months, the rearguard commandery had doubled in size. The number of tiki at the bottom level had increased from 2,000 to 4,000, and the number of non-staff, called strongmen, had increased from 8,000 to 16,000. This meant that there were now a total of 4 Chinhu in the rearguard commandery. Of the original 2 Chinhu, one was in Tianjing Basin, and the other was in the Yun Nation. The 2 newly expanded Chinhu would undergo another 3 months of training. After that, one would be sent to the Yun Nation and the other to Great Xia. The team sent to Great Xia was mainly to investigate the whereabouts of the world's experts, as well as some ancient tombs. According to the traces of the human race after crossing the 60,000 mountains, other than the Aboriginals who stayed in the mountains, the rest should have gone in 2 different directions. One of them was in the direction of the Qin nation, while the majority of the human race went to Great Xia to reproduce. In other words, if that group of people left something in the tombs, it would also be in Great Xia. Moreover, ancient tombs had been occasionally discovered, and each time, some practitioners, and even the imperial court would fight for them. The locations were all in Great Xia. Chapter 885. After Qi Jiayu left the villa, she cried bitterly when she got home. She used to think that the scariest thing in life was to fail at everything, to live with daily necessities and all kinds of trivial things in life. She was not even 40 years old, and she didn't even dare to show up at her classmates' gatherings, for fear that others would ask her how she was doing. For a long time after graduation, she felt that she was very lucky. Of course, it was also because of her hard work and talent. However, those days were like a bubble that was burst. She didn't know whether she should hate the person who exposed all of this. Maybe she didn't know anything, and she would have lived a good life. However, when she found out that she was living in a fake world, she didn't know how much of what she did, saw, and came into contact with was real and how much was fake. Such a discovery almost drove her crazy. It turned out that the scariest thing was to live in front of a curtain, like the world of the Truman Show. During that time, she watched the Truman Show's world over and over again, and every time she watched it, she would cry bitterly. Fortunately, it was finally all over. She was just a substitute, or it could be said that it was only because she was very similar to someone. Since she couldn't make that person let go of her, then she had to find another way. She had to get in touch with him, understand him, and then take revenge on him. Although she was just a substitute could also kill people. The face of the woman she had seen in the past was already blurred in her mind, but she looked very similar to her. The only thing that left a deep impression was that the woman was like a god on an iceberg, looking down coldly. She was ice, so she had to be fire. Only in this way, the complete opposite of her, would she have a chance. In fact, before going to that person, she had prepared herself and began to learn all the ways a woman could attract a man. At the same time, she used all methods to collect information about that person. However, to her surprise, there was very little information about that person, and she couldn't find him on the internet. In this online world, such a thing was almost impossible. If it was an unknown ordinary person, it might be possible. But to live in the real world of the Truman Show and control everything about her, including her clients and her company, how much power did it take? This could only mean that the other party's influence was greater than she thought. After understanding this, her heart was filled with anticipation for the future. There was nothing more delightful than seeing such a person fall in the hands of a doll. After returning from that man's house, she racked her brains every day on how to dress herself up. Although it was only light makeup, not many men liked to wear heavy makeup. But for every piece of clothing, the matching accessories, the details of her hairstyle, and the color of her nails, she had to think about it for a long time almost every day. She originally thought that the other party would come in a few days, but she didn't expect that after a few days, she would end up disappointed every day. The feeling of waiting for a strange man made her feel weird. She even felt like a commodity. A few days, 1 month, 3 months, half a year, she thought it would take a few days, but she didn't expect to see no trace of him after waiting for half a year. Her imagination ran wild every day, causing her to gradually sink into despair. Did he have no value at all in the other party's eyes? Even this toy couldn't make him look away. Those things that made her unable to sleep at night, the unbearable pain, and the determination, everything seemed so futile and ridiculous. It was just her imagination and a one-woman show. She was still an actress in front of the curtain, showing off everything she had, and being watched and laughed by people below the stage. 7 months passed. At night, Chi Jiayu put on light makeup and carefully painted her nails, just like she had been doing for the past few months. She put on a clean set of clothes and walked up to the rooftop. She thought of filling the bathtub with hot water and then putting all her blood in it. That way, it wouldn't be cold. She also thought of using charcoal. But in the end, she still chose this tragic way of dying. If I fall face down, I won't be able to see my face at all. This is also quite good. Chi Jiayu thought to herself and looked up at the night sky. There were almost no stars at night in this city. Standing at the edge of the rooftop, Chi Jiayu looked down at everything that was shrinking under her feet. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then fell forward. However, the feeling of weightlessness only lasted for a moment before it stopped abruptly. Then, she felt the world spin around her, and her body was thrown back to the rooftop. At that moment, someone rushed over, grabbed her arm, and threw her back. Busybody. Qi Jiayu thought to herself. However, when she looked up and saw the figure in front of her, she was stunned. His back was much wider than an ordinary person's. Even on a night like this, she could feel the explosive power of his body. Of course, this wasn't what attracted her. Instead, it was the bald head that emitted light at night. The brightness was about 60 lux, which was equivalent to the brightness of a 12-watt incandescent lamp. He turned around, walked to Qi Jiayu, squatted down, and pinched her chin to carefully look at her. After a while, he let go of her hand and stood up. In fact, he knew that her mental condition was unstable a few days ago. However, due to the time shift, his concept of time was different from hers. To her, 7 months had passed, but to him, it was only a little more than 3 months. Today, he took the time to settle some matters and came back to deal with her. He didn't expect to make it just in time. If he didn't know that she couldn't discover his whereabouts, he would have thought that she was deliberately doing this for him to see. "You're fired." Ren Baqian looked down at her and said faintly. Qi Jiayu looked at him blankly. In fact, when she saw Ren Baqian, she threw all her previous plans to the back of her mind. In addition to nervousness, she was at a loss, resentment, and an indescribable mix of emotions. "You're fired. Prepare to find a new job tomorrow. Go to the place you want to go." Ren Baqian thought that he would see an ecstatic expression on her face, but it wasn't the case. She seemed to understand what he meant. At first, she was puzzled, disappointed, and then couldn't hide her anger. "Isn't this what you want?" "Judging from your expression, it doesn't seem to be the case." Ren Baqian looked down at her. Well, he really couldn't bring himself to like her, mainly because the Empress's divine sense was constantly affecting him and emitting a murderous aura. "Should I be deeply grateful?" Qi Jiayu was also very surprised. After hearing the news, she felt indignant and resentful. She had thought so much and prepared so much, but the other party simply said, "You're fired." If that was the case, why didn't you say that the last time? If you said that the last time, I would have been very happy to find a new life. Since that was the case, why did you make me wait and prepare for 7 months before getting this result? Since you didn't want to let me go, why did you let me go after thinking for 7 months? However, with that one sentence, everything he had thought, done, and prepared was all gone. His revenge ended before it could even begin. 9 years of his youth had been buried in a void of lies just like that. Although I already knew that I'm just a toy with the same face to the other party, when it really comes to this, I have nothing but anger in my heart. Ren Baqian was puzzled, but he didn't want to get involved anymore. Since this matter was over, he turned around and left. Chapter 886. Ren Baqian turned his head when he heard the sound and saw the figure leaping into the air. Ren Baqian frowned and felt a little angry. "You're going to die in front of me after I let you go." Ren Baqian stomped on the rooftop and moved more than 10 meters away, appearing on the parapet wall. It was 18 stories, more than 60 meters high. Even if he didn't die from the fall, he would be seriously injured. Damn it. This was the only thought that flashed through Ren Baqian's mind as he stepped on the wall and rushed down. The feeling of weightlessness enveloped Qi Jiayu's body, and her resentful face became calm. She only had a few seconds left in her life. She tried her best to turn her body and neck to see if that unexpected face would appear above her. However, she saw a scene that she never expected. A figure stepped on the vertical wall and rushed toward her. That big bald head was still shining under the starlight. Why? Qi Jiayu moved her lips. At this height, even if it was a human realm expert, he would still die. Even though she knew that the person in front of her was very powerful, she couldn't tell the difference between him and a man-level expert. In her opinion, even if he didn't die, he would still be in great danger. Why did the other party rush down? It only took 3 seconds to fall from more than 60 meters. Renbochen's fastest speed was 1.5 seconds to cover 100 meters. Renbochen stared at the ground that was getting closer and closer, and his heart beat faster and faster. It wasn't fear, but an inexplicable pleasure. This kind of pleasure made him almost forget what he had jumped down for. Fortunately, when he was more than 10 meters away from the ground, he was finally parallel to Qi Jiayu. He grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace. Before he landed, he pushed her up again and adjusted his landing angle. In just 3 seconds, Renbochen did what most people would take a minute to do. Bang! The moment Renbochen landed, he felt a strong recoil from the soles of his feet. His muscles bulged, and his clothes burst open. Then, he felt a sharp pain from his legs, hip bone, and spine. Even though he had practiced the yang boosting technique, his body couldn't withstand such an impact. The only thing he was thankful for was the flower bed below. He was like a nail that was hammered into the ground by nearly 1 meter. After the sound of his landing, there was another sound of objects falling on the car roof and windows shattering. Damn it! Renbochen's face was full of anger. He wanted to pull himself up from the ground, but he couldn't exert any strength in his legs and hip bone. He reckoned that they were broken. Fortunately, his spine was fine. Damn it, B*TCH, I'm also F*King crazy. Renbochen had nowhere to vent his anger. His lower body was in severe pain and he couldn't move. He could only curse and vent his anger at himself at the same time. But scolding was just scolding, he really couldn't let her die like this. Furthermore, the Empress was pregnant with another one. If she were to die, what if the Empress's strength increased exponentially? Will it affect the fetus? Even if it wasn't affected, given the Empress's condition, she could turn into longevity heaven at any time. How could she continue living like this? If the Cardinal Heaven experts had to give their all, then the longevity heaven experts could only die. He had thought that if he released her, she would be able to start a new life. He didn't expect that he would seek his own death. If he was going to die, so be it. Why did he have to create so much trouble for himself? Following the sound of Renbochen getting up and walking, Qi Jiayu squatted down in front of him. Looking at him, who was half buried in the ground, Qi Jiayu didn't know what kind of expression to make. Why? Qi Jiayu finally asked. At this time, Qi Jiayu's head was bleeding, and her clothes were torn. However, Renbochen threw her up to cushion most of the impact before throwing her onto the roof of the car. She looked battered, but her condition was much better than Renbochen's. Slut! Renbochen didn't have any intention of communicating with her and just wanted to curse. Why did you save me? Slut! I will get someone to capture you and lock you in a cage later. I have never seen anyone risk their life for a toy. Qi Jiayu stared at Renbochen's eyes, trying to see what he was thinking. Get lost. Renbochen was flustered and exasperated. I thought I was going to die. For a moment, I thought you would die too. Qi Jiayu slowly said, at that moment, I actually didn't feel happy. At that moment, her eyes were filled with the bald man who rushed down from the roof by stepping on the vertical wall. Are you F*King going to get lost or not? Renbochen cursed as he pressed his hands against the ground and tried to push himself up. Damn it, he didn't bring the winged cavalry with him this time. However, he brought another person, his new secretary, who had the same background as Shenfeng. And now, that person was still waiting for him on the other side of the building. Who the F*CK would have thought that such a thing would happen? Qi Jiayu was silent for a moment. She watched Renbochen pull himself out of the ground and asked, Do you want to provide for me? This time, it was Ren Baqian's turn to be stunned. Are you out of your mind? Qi Jiayu walked behind Ren Baqian and wanted to hug his chest with her hands. Perhaps she wanted to help him pull himself out, or perhaps she had other ideas. Ren Baqian waved his hand and threw her 3 to 4 meters away. She only stopped when she hit a car. Stay away from me. Next time, if you want to die, stay away. Ren Baqian said fiercely. He didn't know what kind of expression he should have and subconsciously used this expression. Qi Jiayu sat on the ground. Her skirt was already dirty and torn. She sat there and stared at Ren Baqian. Someone will be here soon. When that time comes, they will call an ambulance. Looking at your appearance, you probably won't die. You knew that yourself, so you dared to rush down. However, it's different for me. I will go back to work tomorrow. Come and see me when you have the chance. Qi Jiayu didn't try to get close to Ren Baqian and just sat there. I have said that I don't need you. Get lost. Don't let me see you again. The veins on Ren Baqian's forehead bulged. He felt like his brain was about to explode. How did things turn out like this? Also, was this woman crazy? I will still work there. After all, I am familiar with everything there. Otherwise, I will have to look for you. Why don't you kill me? The corners of Qi Jiayu's mouth curled up, making Ren Baqian even angrier. While they were talking, someone rushed over from a distance. Although it was the middle of the night, the noise still alarmed many people. Remember, come and see me when you have the time. Qi Jiayu said to Ren Baqian seriously. She then helped herself up from the car, pushed away the people who rushed over to help her, and limped toward the building. Ren Baqian was left there, not knowing what kind of expression to make. Qi Jiayu avoided the alarmed people, sat down in a dark corner, and then went into a daze. When the ambulance came and took Ren Baqian away, she sat there paralyzed as if she had lost all her strength. Tears flowed uncontrollably. Chapter 887. Wuji City. Ren Baqian stood in front of the window and looked down at this unique city. The city was deserted, but it was gradually becoming more lively. It had been more than a month since his first visit, and the number of people on the streets seemed to have increased. The most direct observation was that there were 9 people sitting on top of a bus that just passed by. The last time he saw it, there were at most 7 people. His injuries from 2 days ago had mostly recovered, and he could at least walk on his own. Black mud cream and bone healing cream were always available in the palace and on Earth. These medicines were very expensive for ordinary people, but they weren't a big deal for him. Behind him was a frosty lady who was as androgynous as Shenfeng. If it weren't for her long hair and more developed chest muscles than Ren Baqian's, he could even see her as a man. Ren Baqian had to admit that some people could always arrange such an assistant to be by his side. At the very least, there was nothing to question about her resume and ability. However, it had to be said that such an assistant was the safest. If he were to get a beautiful one, Ren Baqian couldn't guarantee that she would live for more than half a year. The Empress was sometimes magnanimous, but at other times, she was also very jealous. Especially after watching so many TV series. It had to be said that TV series were the root of all evil. This time, the assistant's name wasn't androgynous and didn't match her appearance at all. Lin Xiaoyu. She's back at work. She seems to be in a much better state than before. Lin Xiaoyu's voice was a little hoarse. It seemed like she had been selected from her appearance to her voice. As she spoke, Lin Xiaoyu looked at Ren Baqian's back with a little curiosity in her eyes. She knew about Qi Jiayu as Shenfeng had told her about it. As for how they both ended up jumping off a building, she didn't know. However, the hole that Rinpoche smashed gave her a shock. Although it was a flower bed, it was more than half a meter in, and only his legs and hip bones were fractured. This was quite shocking. One had to know that it was 68 meters tall. She was also curious as to why Rinpoche jumped down from there. Just to save that woman. That was surprising to him. From the information she received before coming here, this person in front of her didn't hesitate to kill people. Got it. You can go now, Rinpoche said without turning his head. Should we withdraw the people from the past? Lin Xiaoyu asked with a bit of selfishness. However, Rinpoche didn't care and simply said, withdraw a portion of them and ensure that she's alive. Let her do as she pleases. After Lin Xiaoyu left, Rinpoche rubbed his eyebrows. After going around in a big circle, everything had returned to normal. Forget it, if she wants to stay there, then so be it. When Rinpoche returned to Deo, the Empress revealed a puzzled look the moment she saw him. After scrutinizing him for a while, she frowned and asked, "What happened?" "I found something fun." Rinpoche smiled. "Bungee jumping, Your Majesty, have you heard of it?" The Empress's expression softened a little, and she said with some disdain, "Boring thing." Naturally, she knew about bungee jumping, which was to tie a rope and jump down from a high place. The problem was that she wouldn't die even if she jumped down, so why would she think that tying a rope to her feet would be fun? To her, it was even worse than bumper cars. At least there was some skill involved in bumping cars. "I don't know if I can build a platform that's 150 meters high outside the city." Rinpoche was eager to give it a try. When he jumped down from the rooftop that day, the excitement of weightlessness and acceleration was pretty cool. If he hadn't sped down and thrown Chi Jiayu when he was a few meters away from the ground, he wouldn't have suffered such serious injuries. He estimated that jumping down from about 100 meters would be the same injuries he sustained. As for a height of 150 meters, it would be dangerous for an earth-will expert unless he had specialized in leaping skills. Boring. The Empress curled her lips and ignored him. Rinpoche spread his hands. The Empress wasn't interested, but he was. He hadn't thought about this before, but this time, he suddenly felt that it was quite fun. In addition to bungee jumping, there were also parachuting and hang gliding. He should try them when he had the chance. However, he didn't have the time to build a bungee jumping platform for the time being. The most important thing now was the Internal Combustion Engine Research Institute. Now that he hadn't even used the steam train, it seemed like a big leap to research the internal combustion engine. However, the first gas internal combustion engine was manufactured in 1860, and the first four-stroke internal combustion engine appeared in 1872. Without Rinpoche, someone would probably find a way to reduce the size of the steam engine in 10, 20, or 30 years. However, he couldn't wait that long. With the current manufacturing level, it was completely achievable. The only thing missing was someone proposing this direction. Moreover, the biggest problem limiting the internal combustion engine was fuel, which had been solved long ago. Now, the first batch of sunflowers was about to mature. In 2 months, the first batch of peanuts would mature as well. Rinpoche was going to use biodiesel as the basis for this world's fuel. The next day, a separate small courtyard not far from the school's backyard was officially opened. This was the so-called Internal Combustion Engine Research Center. Every day, in addition to a specific group of craftsmen, there was also a group of senior students in the 4th grade. Graduation in 3 years had been delayed to 3.5 years. This internal combustion engine would be their graduation thesis. In addition to being busy with various matters, Rinpoche also took the time to make a batch of behind-the-scenes footage. This group of simple-minded students had done a lot of the simple-minded things they had done over the past few years, and he had conveniently filmed a lot of them. He was going to show it to them when they graduated. Such a public execution would definitely be a lifelong memory for them. The first movie in Deo was made up of the black spots of these silly students. Hey, where's that Ning fellow? Renbochin had just finished his lecture and returned to his office when someone blocked the door. The smell of roasted sweet potatoes drifted in. Oh, you're still thinking about him. I couldn't tell. You're old but young at heart. Renbochin teased. Nonsense. Do you think I don't know that he's a man? Then, he made him look neither human nor ghost. Li Fu cursed while gnawing on the sweet potato. Then why are you still looking for him? Nonsense. He still owes me money. Li Fu rolled his eyes. I only look for him when I need it. Who would have thought that he would suddenly disappear? How much do you need? Renbochin asked with a smile. 30 taels of silver. Li Fu gestured with his fingers. This was the money from their business partnership. He had expended a lot of effort while that fellow sold a few iron trousers. In the end, he actually ran away with the money. It was really hateful. TSK, TSK. Renbochin exclaimed in admiration. This world's #1 expert was really down to earth for a few dozen taels of silver. Who would believe this? However, Li Fu never had the awareness of being the world's #1 expert. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kicked people's testicles every day. You won't be able to get this money back. He won't be coming back. Renbochin said leisurely. However, I have a good job for you. Do you want to hear about it? Not interested. Li Fu refused without even listening. He was the world's #1 expert. If he wanted to make money, people would come to his door as long as he opened his mouth. He wasn't interested in doing anything for Renbochin. As for the 30 taels of silver, it was different. This was his hard-earned money. About the origin of the human race, the causes and consequences, and another vast world. Renbochin said leisurely. Oh, you mean those monsters, right? Li Fu sneered with a look of indifference. You know about them. Renbochin was a little surprised. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.